Chapter 61. The Plan in My Heart. With Butterfree's breeding season finally over, Musashi and Otani could at last breathe a sigh of relief. In the Alliance, the 3 official starter Pokémon are selected through careful, multi-generation breeding. The best specimens, the ones with outstanding bloodlines and qualifications, are given priority to families who have made major contributions to the Alliance or who have paid significant taxes. That's how Otani ended up with his Bulbasaur. His parents are Alliance Forest Rangers, civil servants whose descendants receive priority access to those coveted starters. Most trainers, however, don't have that kind of backing. They buy legally registered starter Pokémon from licensed breeding houses, and those come at a steep price, generally from a few $100,000 to several $100,000 credits. For an average family, that's a crushing expense, and it doesn't even include the ongoing costs of breeding and training. As a result, many trainers' Pokémon struggle to gain power simply because their owners lack the necessary resources. Most trainers who fall behind never recover. As the years go by, they stop improving, return home with heavy hearts, find work to support their families, and then settle into the same grind for the rest of their lives. Otani had a plan to change that. He decided to use a paid battle format as a way to help struggling trainers. The idea was simple. Players could enter paid matches. Even if they lost, they would still receive a consolation bonus to ease their immediate difficulties. If they won, they could purchase energy blocks from Otani at cost. Savvy trainers could even resell some of those blocks to raise enough money to invest in their Pokemon's training. Otani knew this wasn't a solution for everyone. It wasn't scalable. Not even Daigo, the wealthy heir, could underwrite that level of expenditure for tens of thousands of trainers. But the system did something valuable. It screened out candidates who were both needy and motivated. Mingshu was one of Otani's best success stories. After receiving Otani's support, his abilities jumped dramatically. According to the reports Mingshu sent back, he's planning to compete in this year's Quartz Conference on the Quartz Plateau. Otani was very pleased. If Mingshu placed well at the Quartz Conference, their name would finally start to spread, and with that recognition would come business opportunities. Sponsors and partnerships would bring more resources, allowing him to further develop his Pokémon and create a virtuous cycle of improvement. The recent battles at Otani Farm had already yielded benefits beyond individual wins. Several trainers who'd fought here had clearly improved. What had started as a program to strengthen Pokémon had quietly evolved into a system for identifying and training promising trainers. Otani believed that if these talented civilians continued to rise, they could begin to change the embarrassing standing of some local alliances. If they kept at it, it wasn't impossible that one day they'd produce trainers on the level of the 4 Heavenly Kings. As for the Butterfree on the farm, Otani hadn't planned anything special for them at first. Still, with his guidance, their traits had steadily improved, upgraded from the most ordinary to above average. That meant their offspring would at least begin life with good qualifications, giving the farm even more to build on. By carefully selecting the best individuals from one generation to the next, it only took 2 or 3 rounds to produce a clutch of green caterpillars with outstanding traits. They weren't on the same level as the very best of the 3 starter Pokémon, but for trainers with little money, they were a rare opportunity. Bug-type Pokémon are the quickest to train and the fastest to turn into real fighting power, and these green caterpillars, having 3 stages of evolution, could, with proper care, become a team's core. Otani still had a vivid memory of Aji's Butterfree. Because of that, he intended to open the Bro Odd for public adoption when the time was right. He would screen applicants carefully to make sure each caterpillar went to a competent trainer. After all, he raised them on premium nutrient blocks, something not everyone could afford, so only he could manage the breeding and early rearing required to produce such quality. If this phase of the plan works, it'll let a small number of trainers get hold of higher quality Pokémon and give them a real head start on the path to becoming top trainers. That's something Otani can handle with the skills he has now. We can't scale the program much farther, though, not because of money. Butterfree are valuable enough that feeding and housing them isn't the problem. The issue is manpower. To produce better offspring, we have to give each Butterfree careful hands-on attention, and that kind of meticulous care takes time and energy. There's no one appropriate to hand it off to. Musashi would be a good choice. Meowth could do it. Kojiro is affectionate, but he isn't careful or detail-oriented enough. Our housekeepers are already tied up running the farm and don't have the bandwidth for such delicate work. After weighing everything, I decided I'll take it on myself. What remained was the trial of Olympus, a major undertaking. Right now, the league only offered battle competitions. Coordinator contests were confined to the Sinnoh region, and the Battle Frontier's influence was limited. If the Olympus trial could grow into the kind of world-class event it had been in my previous life, it would open a lot more doors. But the whole project was still in its infancy, and whether it would succeed was anyone's guess. Over the next few days, Otani brought Musashi along to help with the incubator nutrient changes. Newly laid eggs and the later, stabilized eggs need nutrient solutions at different concentrations, so the early stages require more frequent changes. Once the eggs settle, replacements become less frequent. Once Musashi had learned the routine inside out, Otani handed the whole task over to him and added, "You'll also need to help Tayabel prepare the cubes and rations." After so many days on the farm, Iron Dumbbell had completely settled into the rhythm of farm life. He trained and played every day with Sharptooth Landshark and the others, part of the place as naturally as any of them. He had also become good friends with Huabebe. Kids made friends so easily. The iron dumbbells required a lot of ore to maintain, and magnetite was best. For that reason, Otani had even asked Daigo to order a special supply of ore just for them. As for evolution, he planned to try to buy a few more iron dumbbells when he got the chance. After dinner that evening, Otani sat down with Sakaki's Earth Secrets and read for a long time. The more he read, the more astounding the book seemed, and his admiration for Sakaki grew. It laid out, without holding back, the methods for training ground-type Pokémon. When he finally closed the book, he went to bed with those ideas turning over in his head and gradually fell asleep. Even so, he frowned in his sleep, as if troubled by a nightmare. Chapter 62. Darkrai is also a foodie. Otani woke up feeling exhausted. He hadn't slept well all night, and had been haunted by a long, vivid nightmare. His head was still thick with sleep. When he went downstairs, the butler gave him a worried look. Otani smiled and waved it off. He was fine, just short on rest. He explained the dream. In it, he was locked inside a kitchen and forced to cook endless dishes. At first, he had enjoyed it. The constant chopping and experimenting felt almost fun. But after hours of non-stop cooking, it turned into torture. Whenever he tried to escape, an invisible force shoved him back into place. Eventually, he wanted to give up, but his body moved of its own accord, and he kept cooking until dawn. He woke up as the sun rose, sweaty and shaken. Thinking it over now sent a chill down his spine. The nightmare had been deeply disturbing. But with the memories from his previous life, Otani quickly zeroed in on the likely culprit, Darkrai. It wasn't the only possibility. He remembered that in the old anime universe, several trainers had been able to command that rare Pokémon, but Darkrai fit the pattern. Among the Darkrai, the strongest can even command the power of nightmares and rise to the level of a third-ranked deity, known as the Nightmare God. But the creature that had haunted Otani's sleep the previous night was nowhere near that. It had been an ordinary Darkrai, one that merely drifted through the area. A Darkrai's signature trait is the ability to induce nightmares. Any Pokémon that falls asleep nearby will entirely suffer bad dreams, which is why many of them fear and avoid Darkrai. The Pokémon aren't malevolent by nature, though. Their nightmare power is simply a defensive mechanism. Otani decided he'd wait and see. If the nightmares returned tonight, he would try to find and speak with the Darkrai to see if there was any way to stop them. If he slept soundly, it would mean the Darkrai had moved on. He yawned as he finished washing up, unaware of a shadow slipping across the room behind him. The housekeeper glanced up, a puzzled look crossing her face as if she'd sensed something. But after a moment of careful listening and searching, she found nothing unusual and shook off the feeling. Concluding she must have been mistaken, she went into the room and helped Otani straighten the quilt. After washing and breakfast, Otani went about his day. As usual, he started by checking on the construction progress at the Olympus venue. When he returned home, he went down to the basement to make energy blocks. As he came back up, he didn't notice a shadow peel away from the darkness behind him. Lately, Fanged Landshark had brought all his friends to live on the farm. They trained together every day and then hung out in the evenings. The walking grass Otani had treated earlier had since evolved into a stinking flower, Vileplume. At first, the Vileplume's overpowering scent made it something of a problem, but with the patient comfort of Sharp-Toothed Landshark and the others, it improved a great deal. Because of that, Landshark asked Otani for help. Otani thought it over and taught Vileplume a technique similar to holding one's breath. By practicing it continuously, the flower could learn to control when and how it released its smell. The method didn't harm Vileplume's body, and many farmers who raise stinking flowers use the same training to teach their plants to manage their emissions. If the stinking flower could learn to control itself, its nectar would taste better, and its value would shoot up. It didn't take long for the little stinker to figure it out, and it thanked Otani with an almost bashful rustle. Otani decided to harvest some of that nectar and use it to make an unusual dessert. It felt a little strange to think of collecting a flower's saliva, but the flower obliged. Nectar flowed freely, pooling in the jar until Otani finally set the lid on and said, "That's enough." The nectar itself was divisive, the way durian is in another life. People who liked it were addicted, while those who did not were driven away by the smell. Otani didn't care about reputations. He judged food by one thing only, whether it tasted good. Using a durian milfui from memory as his template, he set to work on a stinking flower honey milfui. He layered in other flavors to neutralize the flower's peculiar aroma and mellowed the nectar into the cream. He scooped up a spoonful and tasted it. It was surprisingly, wonderfully good. The younger sister, who liked to be helpful, took a curious bite and immediately fell in love with the flavor. When Otani saw how much she enjoyed it, he gave her the rest. Their older brother, who also liked to play the attentive host, watched his sister with a look of disgust, slipped out of the kitchen, and hid outside. The day passed quickly. After his usual evening reading, Otani went to bed. Except for Bulbasaur, whose huge size required its own space, and Kentaro, who preferred to sleep in the cowshed, the other Pokémon all slept in the same room as Otani, so he felt safe. He closed his eyes and soon fell into a dreamless sleep. He woke refreshed the next morning, washed, had breakfast, and inspected the construction site as usual. Back at the house, he prepared to make more blocks and opened the basement door, then froze. He shut the door, opened it again to make sure he wasn't dreaming, and covered his face with his hands. Darkrai was sprawled on the energy block in the basement. He had clearly eaten too much. He lay there like a round ball, struggling to sit up. His belly was so swollen that his limbs couldn't reach the floor. Otani called for help. Bulbasaur slithered forward and with a careful vine whip lifted Darkrai out. The housekeeper produced a digestive tablet with the practiced ease of someone who had dealt with quarrelsome guests before and fed it to him. Darkrai blinked up at Otani, sheepish and a little embarrassed. "Darkrai, how did you even get onto my farm?" Otani asked, more annoyed than angry. Darkrai avoided his gaze at first, then, after a moment, confessed. He said he had been passing by when a delicious scent, really the scent of dreams, caught his attention. He followed it to the farm, slipped into Otani's dream, and began to feast. The night before, he'd hidden in the shadow of Dagu, planning to stay only one night and then leave. But when Otani accidentally brought him into the basement, it was like a rat stepping into a rice bin. As a wild Pokémon, Darkrai had never seen the cubes before. He tried one, found it delicious, and before he knew it, he was gobbling them down. He ate far too many. The cubes were packed with concentrated energy, and the excess nearly killed him. "If you hadn't come in the morning and found me," Darkrai admitted quietly, "I might have really stuffed myself to death." Otani's annoyance softened into something like relief as he looked at the exhausted Darkrai, the danger past for now. After a long while, Darkrai finally came to. He rubbed the back of his head and glanced at Otani with an embarrassed, guilty look. Otani did a quick tally of what he'd lost and decided it wasn't too bad. Then, catching Darkray's sheepish expression, he couldn't resist pushing a little further. "Darkray," he said with a sly smile, "you ate a lot of my cubes. You need to make it up to me." Darkray flushed and stammered for a moment, but Otani kept going. "I'll let you off the hook, on one condition. You stay here and work for me as my personal bodyguard until I die. After that, you're free to go." He added one more pointed incentive. "I'll feed you every meal on the farm. Refuse, and I'll have no choice but to hand you over to the Alliance." Darkray thought it over carefully. The promise of regular meals mattered. He'd tasted Otani's cooking before and knew it was worth having. More important, as a dark Pokémon, his lifespan was extraordinarily long. A few decades, how long Otani might live, were nothing to him. In the end, he agreed immediately. Darkray felt he hadn't lost anything. Otani, for his part, grinned at what he considered a very profitable deal. He hadn't spent a single coin. He'd effectively gained a bodyguard for free. With Darkray watching his back, his safety going forward would be much more secure. They exchanged satisfied smiles, both convinced they'd made an excellent deal. Chapter 63. Xiaofei Goes to School. Xiaofei was 6 now, and it was clear she couldn't stay on the farm forever. I decided it was time to send her to kindergarten. I called the town school and arranged for her to start the next day. When I told her, she resisted fiercely. She buried herself behind her fussing older sister and refused to come out. It took a lot of coaxing before I could get her to step forward. I understood why she reacted that way. At such a young age, she had been through too much, and the experience had left deep scars. She'd been recuperating here at the farm for a long time, and everyone had been gentle with her. Our housekeeper doted on her. The woman fed her, wrapped her in blankets, and tried to shield her from anything upsetting. If I hadn't stepped in and insisted on correcting some of those habits, the child would only have become more dependent and withdrawn. The next morning, I took Xiaofei into town to buy things for school. At the stationery shop, the bright colors and familiar little objects finally loosened her fear. Her natural curiosity began to show. She peered at the shelves, picked up a box of crayons, and even smiled as she wandered down the aisle. It was a small thing, but it felt like the first real step toward a normal childhood. Dagu was a small local celebrity in Panlin Town, and the shopkeeper, who knew her, grinned as he leaned over the counter. "Oh, Mr. Otani, is this your daughter? She's adorable." Otani gave an embarrassed half-smile. "Haha, no, she's my friend's sister. She's staying with me for a little while." They chatted for a few minutes about nothing in particular, then the shopkeeper suddenly remembered something else. "Speaking of the kindergarten," he said, "something odd has been happening there lately." "Odd how?" Otani asked. "I keep noticing strange smells around the kindergarten," the owner said. "But no matter how carefully I search, I can't find where they're coming from. The principal's been really worried and has been complaining about it to me for a while. Nothing dangerous has happened, so they've just had to live with it for now." "Maybe some Pokémon wandered into the building by accident," Otani suggested. That was the principal's first thought. He even asked Miss Junsha to look into it, but she searched for a long time and turned up nothing. Otani didn't dwell on it, but he made up his mind. He would bring Darkray by tomorrow and see if they could figure out what was causing the smells, if only to put everyone at ease. I helped Xiaofei pick out a cute Pikachu stationery set and a pink, heart-shaped backpack. Then I took her into town for a walk and bought some snacks. We ate as we strolled. I kept thinking it wasn't healthy to keep a child cooped up on the farm all the time. She needed more contact with the outside world. After an hour of wandering around, Xiaofei's mood had clearly brightened. Once she starts kindergarten and makes playmates, things should get even better. By the time we were ready to head back, Xiaofei was getting a little tired. Dagu scooped her up and tried to take her backpack off for her, but she stubbornly refused. She wanted to carry it herself. Dagu smiled and let her. He then summoned Kentaro, and we began the walk home. Not far from the farm, something rustled in the bushes. We found an injured slowpoke lying there. Otani looked surprised. Slowpokes weren't supposed to be around here. Xiaofei immediately felt sorry for it. She leaned close and gently blew on Slowpoke's head as if trying to comfort it. Slowpoke stared back at her with its usual blank expression. Otani wasted no time. He pulled out a first aid potion and sprayed it over Slowpoke's wounds, then watched to see if it would start to recover. Otani crouched down for a closer look. Slowpoke's tail had been hacked off, its body was crisscrossed with scars, and a broken Pokeball lay not far away. Seeing the ruined ball, Otani knew at once the Pokémon had been abandoned. He felt a cold anger tighten in his chest. This sort of thing wasn't new to him. In the original story, Professor Oak's grandson Xiao Mao had done something similar when he was younger, though Xiao Mao had changed with time. Still, he wasn't the only one. Countless inexperienced or impatient trainers, unable to get the results they want, take it out on their Pokémon, blame them, discard them. No wonder so many Pokémon end up bitter and distrustful of humans. Otani drew his own Pokeball and recalled Slowpoke with a single, practiced motion. He handed the ball to Xiao Fei. "Xiao Fei, Slowpoke is yours from now on. Take good care of it." "I will, I promise, Brother Otani," Xiao Fei said, nodding eagerly. Otani ruffled her hair, satisfied, and they set off toward the farm. As they walked, he felt a lingering disgust, deep and simple, at the cruelty of people who would abandon a Pokémon like that. It was the same pattern he'd seen in his previous life. People adopted Pokémon because they were new and exciting, then grew bored and abandoned them without a second thought. The problem wasn't limited to individuals. Many Pokémon today are bred in artificial environments and raised to live with humans. Thrown back into the wild, they often can't adapt, and the weak don't survive. The Pokémon League hadn't found a way to stop it. Cruel as it was, abandoning a Pokémon wasn't illegal, and the culture among trainers didn't help. Too many chased raw power and prizes while ignoring the strength that comes from a real bond. Otani watched all of that, and his mind began, quietly and deliberately, to make plans. When he realized it, they were already back at the farm. Xiao Fei sprang ahead, eager to find the housekeeper and beg her to tend to Slowpoke. The pink creature still looked outwardly calm, but Otani could sense a faint melancholy in its mind, an emptiness beneath the surface. Xiao Fei seemed to notice it too. She sank down beside Slowpoke and wrapped her arms around him, stroking the top of his head and murmuring comforts. Slowpoke met her gaze with that slow, vacant-looking expression of his, eyes dulled but attentive. The sight made Otani's resolve sharpen. The problem was bigger than one abandoned Pokémon, and if nothing changed more, would suffer the same fate. "Stay. Slowpoke, my name is Xiao Fei. We'll be good friends from now on. Stay." Slowpoke's eyes were still dull, but Otani could tell they weren't the same as before. The lifeless glaze had gone. He watched for a long beat, and only when he was sure nothing was wrong did he let out a quiet sigh of relief. Pokémon have such pure hearts. They'll wait years for a promise, and their loyalty can feel more sincere than that of people. Xiao Fei's care was simple and genuine, and because of that, Slowpoke had accepted her so quickly as his new trainer. Otani grabbed some ordinary food blocks and a packet of Pokémon feed from the kitchen and offered them to Slowpoke. The Pokémon just stared at him blankly. Otani hesitated, then popped a block into his own mouth to show it was safe. Slowpoke chewed a few mechanical times, his eyes brightened, and then he started eating in big, eager mouthfuls. Otani thought about the future. Once he recovered from his injury, he'd let Slowpoke and Gyarados live down by the lake together. He'd meant to get more water-type Pokémon earlier, but he'd been so busy lately that he nearly forgot. He planned to visit them tomorrow after sending Fly off to school. When Xiao Fei came back from town, she spent the afternoon playing house with Slowpoke and the Butler siblings. She dressed Slowpoke in an adorable little suit and a tiny gentleman's hat. It looked a bit ridiculous, but in an endearing way, and the jacket conveniently hid all the scars along Slowpoke's body. He clearly liked the outfit. When Xiao Fei tried to help him take it off, Slowpoke clung to the clothes and refused. No matter what she did, she couldn't get him to let go. Then she understood. Softly, she promised to make him more little suits in the future. She told him this one was already dirty and needed washing, and that she would wash it and give it back. Only after that did Slowpoke release his grip, but he followed the clothes the whole way, and when she hung the suit on a hanger, he stood beneath it, staring up at his little outfit with a vacant, almost protective look. Chapter 64. Strange Smell in the Kindergarten. Early the next morning, Xiaofei reluctantly said goodbye to Slowpoke. Slowpoke, dressed in a little suit, stood in the doorway and watched her go with a blank expression. Otani picked Xiaofei up and, with Kentaro accompanying them, they soon arrived at the kindergarten gate. Xiaofei was a transfer student, so they needed to report to the director first. Parents were already dropping off their children. When they saw Otani, they smiled and nodded in greeting, and he returned the polite gestures. At the director's office door, Otani knocked. A voice called from inside, "Please come in." Otani opened the door to find a kindly old woman wearing a flowery shawl and peering at a document over her reading glasses. "You must be Mr. Otani, right?" she said. "Yes, director. Xiaofei calls you Grandma," Otani replied. Xiaofei gave the director a timid "Grandma," then snuggled into Otani's arms and watched the woman warily. The director smiled at her, reached into a drawer, and handed Xiaofei a piece of candy. Otani smiled and gave Xiaofei an encouraging nod. Xiaofei took the candies carefully. She opened one and popped it into her own mouth, then opened another and held it out for Otani, who accepted it. The director watched silently, not interrupting. "Principal, Xiaofei is starting school today. Please take care of her," Mr. Otani said. "Of course, Mr. Otani. It's my pleasure," the principal replied. She stood up and led him toward Xiaofei's classroom. The kindergarten was 3 stories tall. The small children classes were on the first floor. Soon the principal brought Otani to a classroom door with a cheerful sign that read, "Candy Class." The children inside pressed their faces to the windows, curious about the new arrival. Xiaofei ducked behind Dagu, shy, but she couldn't help peeking around him with a hopeful look. Inside the room, a teacher was smiling as he taught, a paintbrush still in his hand. He glanced toward the door, put the brush down, and hurried out. "Director," he called. The director smiled. "Teacher Xiao-ai, this is Mr. Otani, Xiaofei's brother." "This little cutie is Xiaofei," Teacher Xiao-ai said, crouching down and smiling warmly. "Xiaofei, I'm Teacher Xiao-ai. Hello." Otani reached out and gently tapped Xiaofei on the head to prompt her. The little girl glanced up at Dagu shyly and in a small voice said, "Hello, teacher. I'm Xiaofei." "Good job, Xiaofei. Now come and say hello to the class," Teacher Xiao-ai encouraged, holding out her hand. Xiaofei hesitated, then looked again at Dagu. He smiled reassuringly. Otani crouched beside her, made a tiny fist and pressed it to his chest, a quiet cheer of support. Taking a steadying breath and biting her lip, Xiaofei reached for Teacher Xiao-ai's hand. The teacher led her onto the small platform at the front of the room. "Classmates, we have a new student today. Let her introduce herself. Please welcome her with a round of applause." The children clapped excitedly. Xiaofei felt nervous, stared at Dagu for a moment more, then mustered her courage and spoke up so everyone could hear. "Hello, everyone. I'm Xiaofei." "Hello, everyone. I'm Shen Xiaofei. You can call me Xiaofei. I hope we can be good friends." "That's lovely. Is anyone willing to sit with Xiaofei? Raise your hand if you want to," the teacher said. Hands shot up all over the room. Even at this age, the children loved cute new classmates. Today, Xiaofei looked especially adorable. A puffy skirt, a princess-style hairdo, and a pink, heart-shaped school bag. The housekeeper had fussed over her appearance, making sure everything was perfect, and Xiaofei beamed at the sight of so many eager faces. A little girl in the front row stood up and walked confidently to the stage. She took Xiaofei's hand and smiled. "Teacher, Xiaofei can sit with me. I'll protect her from anyone who bullies her," she announced. The girl had short hair and wore a floral dress that made her look cheerful and determined. Teacher Xiao-ai grinned and crouched down, their level. "All right, I'll leave Xiaofei with you, Jasmine." "Yes, I'll take good care of Xiaofei," Jasmine said, squeezing Xiaofei's hand as the other children watched with approval. "Come on, Xiaofei." Jasmine took Xiaofei's hand and led her to the front row. The boy who had been sitting there, a chubby little classmate, shivered when he saw them, got up quickly, and moved to an empty seat in the back, as if deferring to an older sister. Xiaofei slipped into the chair, and Teacher Xiao-ai began the lesson. The kindergarten's lessons were light. Aside from simple counting and recognizing a few characters, most of the time was spent on games that mixed play with learning. The whole point was to teach through entertainment. Dagu lingered in the doorway for a while, watching, and finally left feeling reassured. Xiaofei fit right in. She played happily with the other children. Afterward, Otani and the director walked back toward the director's office together. The director wanted to speak with him. Midway, a sour smell drifted through the corridor. Otani frowned. The director sniffed helplessly. "Mr. Otani, I'm really sorry," the director said. "We've been trying to track down the source of that odor for some time, but haven't located it yet. In the meantime, please be assured we'll make sure the children are safe. Miss Jasmine is staying with Xiaofei in the classroom and will keep monitoring the situation and call maintenance immediately if anything changes." Junsha came by to check on things and said there was nothing unusual, someone reported. Otani didn't worry. He'd seen the principal's behavior a moment ago. There was no way that kindness had been faked. "Miss Principal, I'm a trainer. Let me take a look and find the source of the smell." "Please," she said. Otani stamped his foot once. A shadow slowly peeled away from his own and took shape, looking distinctly reluctant. Otani waved a hand helplessly. "I'll give you an extra snack when we're done," he promised. At the mention of treats, Darkrai immediately brightened and slipped away in shadow form to search the kindergarten. Not long after it returned, floating silently and carrying a Pokémon. Darkrai set the creature down in front of Otani, then melted back into the shadows to watch. Otani leaned forward. The Pokémon looked exactly like a crumpled garbage bag. He frowned. Garbage bag Pokémon were usually born in dumps. What was one doing in a kindergarten? He crouched, pulled a capture cube from his belt, and offered it to the Pokémon. "Here you go, Papadai." Papadai felt a flicker of fear, but he still took the cube. Something about the man standing in front of him told him he wouldn't be harmed, and being near him felt safe. The ragbag's smell was much lighter than usual. When a ragbag makes friends, it will deliberately tone down the odor it carries. The shredded bag standing there had been doing just that. What Papadai still smelled now was only the last traces of dirt clinging to it. Suddenly someone tugged at Dagu's sleeve from behind. "Brother, please don't hurt the torn bag. He's our friend." Dagu turned and saw Jasmine at his elbow. One by one, the children from the candy class had poured out, Teacher Xiao Ai bringing up the rear with a helpless look. The ripped little bag brightened at the sight of them and gave a happy chirp. A child had been sitting by the window and seen the torn bag being grabbed, so she ran to tell Jasmine. Jasmine had come straight over without a word and brought the others with her. Dagu smiled and knelt down. "I won't hurt you, Papadai," he said softly. Then, more gently, "Why did you come to our kindergarten?" Dagu told his story with a little sadness in his voice. He'd once lived at the town dump. One morning, while he was soaking up the sun, a flying Pokémon swooped down, snatched him up, and dropped him near the kindergarten. Scared and alone, he wandered into town until the smell of garbage from the kindergarten drew him inside. That's where Jasmine found him. Feeling sorry for the bedraggled little thing, he brought him lots of tasty scraps, and they quickly became friends. But the torn bag's smell didn't stay hidden for long. It soon caught the attention of the teachers. To keep him from being discovered by Miss Junsha, Jasmine and the other children tucked the ragged bag away in the trash can behind the building. That's why Miss Junsha never found him. When Otani heard the whole story, he burst out laughing. He and the headmaster then went on to explain what had happened to the tattered bag. The children listened, eyes wide with admiration. Jasmine and the others looked at Dagu with obvious fondness. Xiaofei beamed proudly beside them and said with a grin, "Ha! That's my brother." "Brother, you're amazing," Jasmine gushed, looking up at Otani. "You can even understand what the tattered bag is saying." Otani crouched down and ruffled Jasmine's hair, smiling. "When you grow up, you can do it too," one of the children chirped. The question of what to do with the torn bags proved more trouble than anyone had expected. The director had intended to send them back to the landfill, but the children refused to let them go. For a while, the adults were stuck, until the head teacher finally gave in to the kids' pleading and agreed to keep the damaged bag. Otani, who'd been watching, offered a professional opinion that eased the director's worries. He explained that once Papadai, whatever it was the children had found, settled in and made friends, the lingering smells and any surface toxins would disperse. Remove the current worst of the odor from its body, and it would be safe, he said. Hearing Otani speak with that kind of authority reassured the director. Teacher Xiao Ai immediately started to round the children up to help bathe Popodai, but Otani stopped her in time. The torn bag wasn't fragile in the sense of breaking, he said, but it didn't like being dunked in water and shouldn't be washed directly. The right approach was to use clean sand to gently lift off the surface dirt, then carefully wipe it down with a damp towel. In the end, Otani couldn't resist doing the job himself. He supervised the group, handing small tasks to the children and showing Xiao Ai what to do, because he'd still been worried about harming whatever the object was. Under his steady, practiced hands, the task became play. The children enjoyed probing and testing the torn fabric, and their admiration for Otani grew as they watched his skillful, patient work. About half an hour later, the torn bag was gleaming and the smell had completely disappeared. Otani reached out to ruffle the little head. "Go on. Have fun." Popodai bolted toward the other children, tail wagging, and was soon running around with them. Teacher Xiao Ai moved the class outside and asked each child to draw a portrait of Popodai. Otani and the director watched from a distance. Once they saw everything was settled, they went into the principal's office to finish the remaining paperwork. After Otani paid the tuition, he said his goodbyes and left. The director picked up the phone and called Miss Junsha. She hesitated at first, but when she learned Otani was the guarantor, she agreed, saying she would register it and make regular checks. The director hung up. When Otani returned to the farm, he was surprised to find Slowpoke still standing at the doorway, staring blankly. The housekeeper came forward and explained. Slowpoke had been waiting there since Xiaofei left for school, and no matter how they tried to coax him back inside, he refused to move. Otani crouched and rested a hand on Slowpoke's head. The Pokémon glanced at him for a moment, then went back to staring blankly at the front door. Otani didn't try to drag him back inside or offer any grand reassurance. He simply sat there beside him in silence. He understood why Slowpoke was like this. Even a slow, placid Pokémon could be traumatized by abandonment. Slowpoke was terrified of being left again, so he waited at the door, convinced Xiaofei would come back. Otani believed it was something Slowpoke had to work through himself and that seeing Xiaofei again would help. He wasn't worried. He asked the housekeeper to keep an eye on Slowpoke and left for work. That afternoon, Otani picked Xiaofei up from school and brought her back to the farm. She squealed when she saw Slowpoke waiting at the door, hurried over, and hugged him. A rare, genuine smile spread across Slowpoke's usually blank face. Xiaofei chattered excitedly about her day at kindergarten, while Slowpoke listened quietly, content just to be near her. After dinner, Otani went looking for Slowpoke. He wasn't sure the Pokémon could understand words, but he sat down beside him anyway and spoke from the heart. "Take care of yourself on the farm, train and get stronger, and remember that Xiaofei and I won't abandon you." Slowpoke stared back with that same vacant, goof-off expression, and Otani found himself at a loss. It seemed only Xiaofei could really reach him. When Otani told Xiaofei that Slowpoke had waited for her that day, she hurried over and gathered him into a careful, earnest hug. She promised him, softly and firmly, that they'd be friends for life. Slowpoke looked at Xiaofei, then at Dagu, and suddenly tears welled in his eyes and ran down his cheeks. Relief and joy washed over him. He had a new home again. Chapter 65, Spring Farm Outing. A week flashed by, and Xiaofei had settled completely into kindergarten life. She and Jasmine had become fast friends, and Xiaofei was noticeably brighter and more outgoing. Otani finally let out a sigh of relief. His niece was no longer living in the shadow of those first difficult days. One afternoon, the principal called to say the kindergarten was planning a spring outing and asked if they could visit Otani's farm. Otani was happy to host them. He spent the rest of the day preparing snacks and juice to serve the children the next morning. When the bus arrived at the farm gate the following day, a line of little faces pressed to the windows. Dressed in their uniforms and clutching small flags, the children hopped off the bus in pairs, led by their teachers and holding hands. The sight of the farm made them gasp. "It's so beautiful, Xiaofei. I wish I could live here," one of the girls, who had grown close to Xiaofei, exclaimed. The teachers organized the children by class and led them into the farm, one group at a time, chattering excitedly as they went. Otani had been waiting at the door for a long time. The director had specifically ordered that nothing be prepped in advance. Everything was meant to give the children a chance to practice hands-on skills, so Otani hadn't done anything extra. The teachers formed the kids into their respective classes and announced a little contest. Which class could pitch the tent first? The children were eager to show off. From across the playground, Otani watched Xiaofei and her friends struggle and laugh as they worked on their tent, but he didn't interfere. He slipped back into the kitchen, took out the snacks he'd prepared the day before, and set them on the table outside. The director came over and thanked him. Watching the children fussing and cooperating, Otani sighed with a smile. "What a bunch of good kids," he said. The director grinned. "You should see them when they're upset," he replied. "That's when they give you a real headache." They both laughed. Before long, the contest was decided. First place went to a child from the senior class. Xiaofei looked a little disappointed at not winning, but Jasmine tucked an arm around her and consoled her, and she brightened up again. Once the tent was up, we began unpacking the cooking gear. The teachers divided out the chores. Some kids were sent to wash vegetables, others to gather firewood. The riskier tasks, like chopping, were left to the adults. When most of the prep work was finished, the teachers called everyone together and announced an hour of free time. They set clear boundaries for where we could go and warned that anyone who wandered outside the limits would be punished. At the mention of free time, the children cheered, and the teachers dismissed us. The moment the call to break ranks was given, we scattered like a flock of birds. Small groups formed instantly. Friends paired off and ran toward the fields for a little farm-side adventure. Otani found the kid who was leading the Butterfree group and asked him to keep an eye on our things. He agreed without hesitation. The rest of us streamed across the farm, filling the quiet fields with laughter and motion. A cluster of children swarmed around Venusaur, patting its broad back and peering at the strange plant on its shoulder. A few more clambered onto Snorlax's belly and bounced as if it were a trampoline. Whenever someone bounced too high and threatened to roll off, Bulbasaur was there to step in and catch them with surprising accuracy. The peaceful farm had come alive with the noisy, energetic joy of a dozen kids at play. All the farm's Pokémon had been assigned to look after the children. Gyarados, lumbering along the pasture, carried several kids on his broad back and guided them across the grass with a resigned air. He wanted to use the time to train. He'd always joked that if he skipped a day, he'd lose a month's worth of progress, but with the youngsters clambering about, he could do little more than keep them from tumbling off. No, enticing that recess was nearly over, the headmaster gave a discreet signal, and the teachers began gathering the children to prepare lunch. Under the teacher's direction, the kids split into groups and set about making their own meal. Needless to say, a room full of excited children is not the most efficient kitchen brigade. Pots were scorched, pans were left underdone, and more than one improvised concoction ended up looking and smelling suspicious. The children fell quiet, crestfallen at their mistakes. The headmaster used the moment to teach them a few basics: attention to time, how to tend a flame, and the importance of teamwork, and then told the teachers to fetch fresh ingredients and try again. The second round went much more smoothly. The teachers did most of the heavy lifting, but the children paid better attention and at least produced dishes that were edible. A handful of boys had curled up in a corner and were dawdling rather than helping. The headmaster noticed them, but he said nothing. When it was time for lunch, the boys lined up to get their food. A few of the younger ones felt it was unfair that others started eating first, and the headmaster used the moment to give them a gentle lesson in patience. Once they realized their mistake, he let them go and eat. Otani had been watching from the side and admired the headmaster's ease. He was impressed that the man could quiet and straighten out the rowdy kids so quickly. After the meal, the headmaster brought out the snacks and juice Otani had prepared and handed them out, explaining who had provided them. At the teacher's prompt, the children thanked Otani together. He smiled and told them there would be more if anyone wanted seconds. Then it was time for a nap. The teachers led the children back to their tents and settled them down. The lively farm gradually fell quiet as everyone instinctively lowered their voices so as not to wake the sleeping kids. The teachers on patrol kindly tucked blankets over the dozing children. A few troublemakers tried to stay awake, but the teachers got them under control, and they were asleep before long. The place fell quiet and peaceful for a while, until the nap ended and it was time for games. The farm came alive again with laughter. Even Otani couldn't resist joining in for a while. They taught the children the games they had played as kids: Eagle catches the chicks and pass the parcel, and the children spent the whole afternoon having a blast. When the time came, the teachers lined everyone up and ushered the children onto the school bus in an orderly fashion. Xiaofei stayed behind since she lived on the farm, but she was fast asleep in Dagu's arms, so tired from play that she couldn't keep her eyes open. Otani gently wiped the sweat from her forehead and asked the housekeeper to give her a hot bath. Although the weather had warmed, being sweaty and caught in a breeze could still lead to a cold. At dinner, Otani had to rouse her and make sure she ate a little before being put back to bed. Xiaofei finished her dinner in a daze, and the housekeeper led her up to her room to sleep. Slowpoke followed like a little shadow the whole way. With the children quiet, the farm sank back into its usual calm. Otani pulled his book out again and resumed studying the mysteries of the earth. He had skimmed it once before, but a second reading was already opening up fresh insights. He lost himself in the pages and didn't notice the time. It wasn't until the housekeeper, sounding annoyed, reminded him that it was time for bed that he looked at the clock. It was already midnight. He scratched his head sheepishly and promised he wouldn't stay out so late again. Only then did she let him go. Chapter 66, Invitation. The next morning, I received a call from the principal. Would Otani come and tell the kindergarten kids about Pokémon? Otani agreed without hesitation and set the visit for the following day. After breakfast, I sent Xiaofei off to school, went back to the farm, and got on with the day's chores. Once the work was done, Otani started thinking about how to make the lesson lively and memorable for the children. We decided the best approach would be to use pictures, bright, simple visuals that the kids could easily remember. After lunch, I locked myself in the studio and began preparing the materials. I stayed busy all afternoon. I even asked my brother, who's great with kids, to pick Xiaofei up from school. It wasn't until after dinner that everything was finally finished. Xiaofei was bubbling with curiosity. Her teacher had told the class that Dagu would be coming to the kindergarten tomorrow, and she wanted to know what Otani had planned. When she tried to press for details, Otani intercepted her outside the studio and told her she'd have to wait until tomorrow. While Xiaofei was distracted, he scooped her up and settled in to help her finish that evening's homework. Xiaofei spent the whole day trying to get away, but by bedtime she still hadn't succeeded. She tried to sneak off, but Otani caught her. She shot him a resentful look, but he didn't give an inch. The next morning, after packing his things, Otani brought Xiaofei to the kindergarten. The principal was already waiting at the gate. "Welcome, Mr. Otani. Thank you for coming today," she said with a smile. Otani waved her off. "You're too kind, Principal. I'm just going to teach the children a little about Pokémon. It's no trouble." They exchanged a few pleasantries and went inside. Class hadn't started yet. The children were still playing with beanbags on the playground. When the teachers saw Otani and the principal arrive, they called the kids together, handed out little stools, and told them to sit. Xiaofei made a point of sitting next to Jasmine. Jasmine winked at her. Xiaofei gave a small, rueful shake of her head. The principal led Otani up onto a makeshift platform and introduced him to the class. When he finished speaking, there was a light smattering of applause. Otani wasn't the least bit embarrassed. He stepped up to the microphone and began to speak. "Hello, children. I'm Dagayu, a farmer and Pokémon breeder. Today I'm going to tell you a story about Pokémon. Do you want to listen?" At the promise of a story, the children in the audience immediately answered in unison, "Yes." "Then sit down nicely. The story is about to begin." Otani unfolded the drawing board he had brought and launched into the tale. He told how Pikachu met many friends on his adventure: Rattata, unicorn beetle, caterpillar, and others, the kinds of Pokémon commonly found in the Kanto and Johto regions. Along the way, they ran into different problems, and each Pokémon used its own strengths and moves to solve them. Otani sprinkled the story with descriptions of each Pokémon's traits and even named some of their moves, pairing his words with lively pictures on the board. The vivid images and entertaining episodes slipped into the children's heads almost without them realizing it. After about half an hour, the story reached its climax. Pikachu and his friends came face to face with a great Dark King, Darkrai. Otani pulled out a drawing board with a fierce picture of Darkrai on it, and the children gasped. Some of the more timid kids didn't dare look directly. They peered through their fingers instead. In the story, Darkrai, hiding in the shadows of the Great Valley, was taken aback to hear himself described that way. All right, so I'm the scary villain, okay? That's biased. I protest, he grumbled. The tale soon reached its climax. With Pikachu and his friends working together, they managed to defeat the big devil. Afterwards, they discovered there was nothing truly evil about him. He had simply been woken up and was in a foul mood. The Pikachu apologized sincerely, and Darkrai forgave them at once. They ended up playing happily together and became good friends. When the story finished, the children buzzed excitedly about what had happened. Otani watched them chat with a smile and didn't interrupt. After a little while, he checked the time and realized the session was nearly over. He cleared his throat twice to quiet them down. The kids assumed he was going to continue the story and fell silent in expectation. Instead of another chapter, Otani announced a quiz with prizes. If you answer correctly, you can take home the drawing board I brought today, Otani announced, holding up the prize. His paintings of Pokémon were so vivid they looked alive, and the children had been green with envy listening to him earlier. Now that one of his drawing boards was up for grabs, every hand shot into the air. Otani signaled to the teachers to keep things under control. One by one, they stepped forward and hushed the excited crowd. Then Otani began. What moves did Pikachu use to defeat the great demon Darkrai? He asked. A little boy shot his hand up. Otani nodded at him to answer. The child's voice trembled as he began. 100,000 volts, and a flash of lightning. Come on, just a little more, Otani prompted. Kids in the back, don't shout the answer, one of the teachers warned. With a little help from his friends, the boy thought a moment longer and finished. And the power grid. That's right. Great job. Let's give this young man a big round of applause, Otani said. The room filled with cheerful clapping as the children celebrated the winner. Otani looked a little embarrassed as he stepped down and asked me to pick a picture. I chose Pikachu without hesitation. My classmates crowded around me, green with envy. Xiaofei didn't seem jealous at all. She just said when she got home she'd ask Brother Otani to draw them all for her. Otani went on to ask a few more questions. The kids answered one by one. The drawings were handed out quickly. Those who missed out were disappointed. A few even burst into tears, until Otani promised he'd come back with more beautiful pictures. That settled them. That was the end of the session. After he walked off the stage, Otani wiped the sweat from his brow, and the head teacher handed him a glass of water. He thanked her, and I began chatting with the head teacher, while watching the other teachers lead the children back into the classroom in an orderly line. After finishing his drink, Otani returned the cup and left. On the walk back, Otani came up with an idea. He could turn his fun stories into illustrated books and give them to the children at the kindergarten. It would be entertaining and educational at once. Kill two birds with one stone. Trainers need to build a solid foundation early and nurture a love of Pokémon, he thought, and couldn't help admiring his own cleverness. When he got back to the farm, he immediately began sketching the manuscript. That evening, however, Xiaofei came home from school and began pestering him for drawings. She wanted him to sketch lots and lots of Pokémon. Otani found the requests annoying, so he struck a deal. She could have a drawing in exchange for doing some chores. You can't just hand things over, he told her. She might get spoiled. Better to teach her the value of earning it. For the next few days, Otani split his time between farm work, finishing the story comic, and drawing Pokémon for Xiaofei. It was busy but satisfying. Before he knew it, The quartz conference was almost upon them. Otani remembered Mingshu saying he wanted to take part, so he couldn't miss it. Chapter 67. The Quartz Conference begins. On the opening day of the Quartz Conference, Otani was up early and waiting in front of the television for the broadcast to start. Even though the signal was clogged with endless commercials, he watched eagerly. He had all his Pokémon gathered around as well. He wanted them to observe and learn from the strategies and poise of the league's top competitors. When the interminable ads finally stopped, the opening ceremony at last began. After a short speech from the Alliance's senior leaders, the announcer declared the competition officially open. Fireworks lit the sky and ceremonial salutes rang out across the stadium. Entry to the Quartz Conference was reserved for the league's elite. Trainers first had to collect 8 gym badges, then pass regional auditions, where hopefuls were whittled down until only 16 remained. Those 16, the strongest of the field, would travel to the Quartz Plateau to compete. They were a rare breed in the entire league and widely regarded as the backbone of future champions. Otani watched the pageantry with a mix of admiration and determination, already picturing the lessons his team could borrow from such high-level competition. Sometimes a competitor gets into a big tournament on nothing more than luck. Those lucky few rarely have real skill, and most of them are knocked out in the first round. Bulbasaur and the others were sitting in front of the TV, eager for the broadcast. This was a once-a-year spectacle where the best trainers in the league gathered, a perfect opportunity to learn new strategies and see how top teams were built. The rules were strict. In official matches, and even in gym battles, every Pokémon can only use 4 moves. That constraint makes move selection and team composition crucial. Trainers design lineups around a core strategy. For example, a rain team, assigning roles like core, support, physical attacker, and special attacker. Moves, items, and even held items are chosen to support that central plan, so the team's strengths are maximized and resources aren't wasted. Cheaters like Otani, of course, are barred from events like this. On the stage, Mingshu and the other 16 trainers filed out one by one. They walked to the center to draw lots and have the groups announced. When the names were called, Mingshu found himself placed in Group A. His next opponent was a very pretty girl named Cindy. After the pairings were announced, the Group A competitors took a moment backstage to rest before heading out. The audience's excitement filled the arena. It made Mingshu's stomach flutter. This was his first time in a contest of this scale. He forced himself to breathe slowly and calm down. When it was time, they stepped into their battle zones. The referee ran through the rules, then signaled for the match to begin. "Go, Butterfree," Mingshu called. Cindy answered in kind. "I'll send out Chixie Bluebird." A coin toss played on the big screen. As the coin tumbled, the display settled on Mingshu's face. He'd go first. "Butterfree, sleep powder," he ordered. Butterfree released a cloud of pale, shimmering powder that streaked across the stage and struck Chixie Bluebird. Sleep powder normally has a 75% accuracy, but Butterfree's Compound Eyes ability greatly boosts the chance of moves hitting. With that advantage, the powder was almost certain to connect, and it did. Chixie Bluebird's eyes drooped almost immediately, and it slumped into a deep sleep. Just as Mingshu was about to follow up, Cindy acted first. She decisively recalled Tanabata Bluebird, using up her only chance to recycle it. At the same time, the bird's natural recovery took effect, and the hypnosis faded. Cindy snapped the Bluebird's Pokeball closed, drew another ball from her belt, and sent out a new Pokémon. "Go, Spiny Shell." Spiny Shell's hidden trait is dustproofing. It's immune to weather damage like sandstorms, and, crucially, to powder-type moves. That meant Butterfree's hypnosis powder was useless against it. Cindy had clearly anticipated this. Many trainers opt to pair Spiny Shell's multi-hit property with Shell Break for brutal burst damage. Still, Mingshu didn't panic. By the rules, he still had the opening move. "Butterfree, Insect Dance." Butterfree began to twirl and dance in the air, preparing its attack. Its body flashed as light rippled over its shell. Its stats rose. Special attack, special defense, and speed all climbed. Spiny Shell, Shell Smash. Butterfree, Quiver Dance, now. Spiny Shell, Icicle Crash. An icicle condensed in midair and hurtled toward Butterfree, but Butterfree had already stacked 2 Quiver Dance boosts. Its speed had skyrocketed. it slipped out of the way with ease. Butterfree, Bug Buzz, Spiny Shell, use scattering sprites. The Spiny Shell met Butterfree's Bug Buzz head-on, activating its countermeasure. Logically, with 2 Quiver Dances and the Shell Smash's defense cuts, Butterfree should have scored a one-hit knockout. But the Spiny Shell held on. It had survived. That meant it must be holding a stance shawl. Mingshu had expected as much. Butterfree Hurricane, Spiny Shell, scattering sprites again. Cindy had still underestimated Butterfree's power. Even though she'd prepared for this, the Spiny Shell's dust-proof defenses weren't proving very effective. It was being squeezed on every front. With no better option, she settled for the next best thing. She used Diamond Throw twice in a row to set up the next phase. Just before it lost the ability to fight, the Thorny Clam managed to scatter spikes across the field, a small comfort that made Cindy feel a little better. She recalled the shrimp, patted it comfortingly, and sent out her next Pokémon. Go, Pidgeot! Because Cindy had been on the back foot moments before, she decided to take the initiative this time. Pidgeot, use Wing Attack! Pidgeot swept into the air and dove at Butterfree with blistering speed. Dodge! Mingshu shouted, and Butterfree twisted to avoid the blow, but Pidgeot's keen eyesight ignored the evasive maneuver and the attack landed. Pidgeot, now, Return of the Swallow. Barely finishing its first strike, Pidgeot spun and struck from behind with lightning speed. Butterfree, still staggered by the wing attack, was slammed again by the Swallow return and immediately went down, unable to continue. Otani, watching on TV, saw the match even out. The score was now 1-1. The quick attack from moments ago had taken care of Akari's Butterfree with almost no effort. Butterfree was effectively out of the fight. The match had become a string of feints and counter tricks, and Otani was visibly thrilled by how it was unfolding. Akari, meanwhile, found herself on the back foot. What would she do next? Otani couldn't wait to find out. Mingshu remained calm. He recalled Butterfree, murmured a few soothing words as he withdrew it, then sent out his next Pokémon. Go ahead, Tyrannosaurus. No sooner had the Tyrannosaurus hit the field than something unseen, some lingering spiritual effect, struck it, shaving away a sixth of its health. Rock Blockade, Otani called. Rocks exploded across the arena, but Pidgeot twisted and weaved, avoiding the worst of it. Then it folded its wings and dove. Steel Wings! Otani shouted as Pidgeot's feathers flashed silver. With the added speed of the dive, a hit from that attack would have seriously injured the already weakened Tyrannosaurus. Mingshu didn't flinch. He assessed the situation quickly and then spoke. Sharp Stone Attack. Spikes erupted from the ground in an instant. Pidgeot, already committed to the dive, had no time to pull out. Its momentum carried it straight into the sudden barrier of jagged rock. The impact was brutal. Pidgeot was hit hard and immediately knocked out of the battle. Mingshu had an uncanny sense of timing, always one step ahead in the flow of the fight and ruthless in following up every opening. Watching him, Otani had to admit, quietly to himself, that even if he tried to copy those moves, he couldn't have done them any better. Chapter 68, Courts Conference 2. Cindy recalled Pidgeot and tossed out another Pokeball. Out, Strange Force. Use your power. Across the field, Mingshu barked orders to his Pokémon. Iron-armored Tyrannosaurus, make those sharp stones, form a line of rocks and charge. He followed up instantly. Step on the stones and rush. Use Earth Throw, then raise a rock barricade. Stop it. When Guile heard the commands, he leapt into the air, landing on the jagged stones that had erupted from the ground. Using them as stepping stones, he launched himself straight at the iron-armored Tyrannosaurus. In mid-flight, he threaded a narrow gap in the rising rock barricade and dropped down behind it, evading the barrier. Mingshu's eyes narrowed. This creature was stronger than he'd expected. Keep up the rock blockade, he shouted, desperate to trap it. But before his wall could close, Guile closed the distance. With a fierce tug, he seized the Tyrannosaurus by its limbs and hurled it to the earth. Under Guile's fourfold grip, the iron-armored Tyrannosaurus didn't stand a chance. There was a heavy crash as it slammed into the ground, smoke and dust billowing up around them. When the dust settled, the Tyrannosaurus lay motionless, clearly unable to continue the battle. Guile backed away, watching his fallen opponent as the haze slowly cleared. Mingshu recalled his Tyrannosaurus and snapped open another Pokeball. Alakazam, Get out here. Use disable. Alakazam materialized in a flash of light. The move struck the opposing Pokémon dead on, blocking several of its attacks and preventing it from using them for 4 turns. Now use Psychic to hurl the Earth, Mingshu ordered. Teleport, came a shout from the other side. Then another voice barked, keep using Earth power, and someone else cried, Psychic Blast. A powerful psychic shockwave erupted, slamming into Kyrie. Kyrie lunged for Alakazam but staggered and crumpled to the ground right in front of Hoodie, rendered incapable of continuing the fight. The opponent's Pokémon was formidable, astonishing speed and raw power, but its defense was painfully low, which made it dangerous in short bursts and vulnerable to sustained pressure. Alakazam himself hadn't been at full strength either. Soling's earlier strike had already sapped 1/6 of his stamina the moment he came out. Mingshu felt the pressure, but by exploiting the type advantage, he was able to neutralize the threat. Cindy withdrew her battered Pokémon without fanfare and tossed another ball. Houndoom, go! Use Taunt! Houndoom snarled and stepped forward, teeth bared. The taunt hit Alakazam, causing his eyes to flare red, but his will was strong. He resisted the provocation and kept his focus. The move was a provocation, essentially a taunt. Alakazam could no longer avoid Houndoom and was forced to attack. Someone shouted, Hoodie, stay strong! Hey Luga, bite it to pieces, came the command. Alakazam launched a Psychic at Houndoom, but Houndoom was unexpectedly fast. A black, maw-like mass formed at its jaws and clamped down on Alakazam. The attack left Alakazam stunned and unable to continue. Mingshu suddenly found himself on the defensive. Otani sat silent in front of the TV, eyes fixed on the screen. He was curious to see what Mingshu would do next. Mingshu recalled Alakazam and sent out a different Pokémon. Go Sansara, use Rapid Spin. The Sandshrew curled into a perfect ball in midair, and the moment it hit the ground, spun so quickly that it blew away the scattered embers and debris littering the field. Otani frowned slightly. Why hadn't Mingshu sent Sandslash earlier to clear those effects in the opening rounds? He's going to Flamethrower, someone shouted. Spin and break the sand. Hold on, Mingshu ordered. Cindy stared, stunned. What? Can a jet of flame really be defended against like that? She asked. Otani only smiled. That trick had been his suggestion, and now, without even knowing it, Mingshu had used his idea. Mingshu didn't hesitate. She called Sandslash to whip up a sandstorm, and a choking swirl of grit tore across the battlefield. Thanks to its sand hiding trait, Sandslash melted into the storm, its evasion sharply improved. Houndoom staggered from the blast. Pain flashed across his face, but he quickly steadied himself and narrowed his eyes, trying to make out the battlefield through the dust. Hiroga, hold on, Cindy snapped. Hiroga braced and threw up a defensive move just in time. From inside the sand cloud, Sandslash suddenly spun and surged toward Houndoom. Mingshu had signaled it the moment the storm began. Hide in the sand, then strike with Gyro Ball. Hiroga's defense completely absorbed Houndoom's attack, but the Gyro Ball was aimed at Houndoom's back. Gyro Ball grows stronger the faster the opponent is, and, if the user has the training and endurance, it can be kept spinning and fired repeatedly despite the centrifugal force and dizziness. Mingshu's Sandslash had clearly been trained for this. It could sustain the spin far longer than most. Houndoom didn't dare cancel his defensive move. Without that protection, a single hit could wipe him out. Gyro Ball's power in the game is calculated as 25 times target speed, user speed, capped at 150. If there were no limits, a slow attacker facing a very fast target could obliterate even the mightiest Pokémon, the so-called divine beasts, in one blow. Fortunately, that kind of scenario was rare in practice, but it explained why Houndoom had to stay guarded. So the two ended up in a stalemate. Sandslash kept launching Gyro Ball after Gyro Ball, while Houndoom held his defensive posture, waiting for a chance to counter. Gradually, Houndoom's energy dwindled, and Sandslash's attacks grew harsher. Finally, one Gyro Ball broke through Houndoom's defenses. Houndoom was struck full, launched across the arena, and slammed hard into the wall. Sandslash immediately stopped spinning, and he looked far from exhausted. The high-speed rotation hadn't drained him as much as Houndoom had expected. Houndoom! The referee hurried over to check, then raised the flag to show there was no serious injury. Cindy let out a relieved breath and recalled Houndoom, tucking him back into his Pokeball to recover. She only had one Pokémon left now. "Go Tanabata!" she called. The bluebird cried back, bright and clear. "Tanabata, use Cotton Guard, Gyro Ball, White Fog." A soft white mist spilled out from the bluebird's wings and quickly cloaked it. The spinning steel orb lost its target and sailed harmlessly through the fog. Sandshrew slipped into the swirling sandstorm and vanished from sight, avoiding the bluebird's counterattack. The storm slowly died down. Grains of sand trickled back to the ground like rain. Cindy didn't hesitate. "Tanabata, Dragon Stars!" Under the bird's control, draconic energy condensed above the arena, coalescing into glittering pinpricks of light. The lights fell like a shower of meteors aimed straight at Sandshrew. "Dig!" Mingshu ordered, and Sandshrew burrowed instantly, disappearing beneath the surface. The dragon stars slammed into the earth, the impacts reverberating through the stadium as the ground trembled. When the dragon attack finally ended, the Sandshrew burst out of the ground, staggering and clearly shaken. It hadn't been hit directly, but the energy had radiated through the earth and knocked the little Pokémon off balance. Without missing a beat, it curled into a compact ball and began to spin. Gyro Ball. It picked up speed, catapulted into the air, and launched itself straight at the Tanabata bluebird. The bluebird's body puffed up instantly, wrapped in a cushioning halo of Cotton Guard. The Sandshrew slammed into it, but the blow barely registered. Seizing the moment, the bluebird replied with a blast of dragon energy that rippled outward. The Sandshrew dropped back to the ground and threw up a whirling wall of sand to protect itself. For a few tense moments, the two Pokémon traded moves. Spin against fluff, sand against dragon energy, each countering the other. Mingshu's worry grew. If the duel went on like this, he'd lose. Sandshrew had already been pushed to the limit, while the bluebird, perfectly tuned to the Chixie Festival, was still fresh. "Crossland King, full power, Gyro Ball," Mingshu shouted. At his command, Chuanwang doubled its rotational speed without hesitation. The rush of air from its furious spinning lifted the sand into a blinding maelstrom, turning the battlefield into a roaring vortex as Gyro Ball built toward full force. The Sandshrew was knocked out almost instantly. "Chixie Bluebird, Cotton Defense!" Cindy snapped. Chixie Bluebird reacted in time and managed to block the blow, but the force of the attack left it off balance. As soon as Sandslash hit the ground, it ricocheted back up and struck from behind Tanabata Bluebird. This time, Cindy didn't have a chance to respond. The impact crippled Chixie Bluebird, and it could no longer continue. The match was over. Mingshu had won. The crowd erupted into cheers. Mingshu and Cindy met at center stage and shook hands. Cindy looked impressed as she said, "Your Sandslash is incredibly strong, but why didn't you just send him out at the start to clean up the Sandshrew?" She'd asked the same question Otani had raised earlier. Mingshu smiled faintly. "Using weaker Pokémon at the beginning can hurt my standing, but it also makes you lower your guard. That lets me read your next move more easily. Even if my Pokémon take some hits, I was confident I could still beat you." "So that's how it was," Cindy said, though she couldn't quite accept his explanation. "Ha ha ha, maybe you didn't notice, but during the fight you kept making small movements that gave away your state of mind. I read you from those." Cindy thought it over and had to admit he was right. She'd had a slight edge because of the way she dispersed her energy, but those tiny tells betrayed her. Mingshu had seen every little shift, and from them he was able to predict the direction of her attacks, exactly why she'd felt constrained in the previous match. "Thank you for the advice. I accept my defeat," she said, switching to a more respectful tone. It wasn't often someone offered constructive criticism after a fight, and she appreciated it. Her regard for Mingshu rose noticeably. The last two contestants stepped out, and Cindy kept peppering Mingshu with questions, calling him senior again and again. Otani sat in front of the TV with a smile, watching the two of them. "Mingshu, take this chance." The second match of Group A began. After a fierce battle between the two trainers, a winner was finally decided. Mingshu watched in silence from the sidelines. Cindy chattered beside him like a lark, talking non-stop, but it didn't bother him. Group A's matches had finished that morning, and Group B picked up in the afternoon. Mingshu didn't miss a single bout. Although Cindy had already been eliminated, she stayed and watched with him. Otani, too, had followed every match on TV. When the competitions for both groups wrapped up that day, Mingshu returned to the hotel where he was staying and called Otani. Otani shared a few observations and suggestions, which Mingshu accepted humbly. Then Otani asked why Mingshu hadn't responded sooner when the other side made their move. Mingshu gave a brief explanation of the situation. Otani fell silent for a moment. "I thought you had something planned," he said finally. "I didn't expect it was just for show." He chose his words carefully, then outlined the stakes and interests involved, warning Mingshu that the behavior looked an underestimation of the opponent and advising him to be more cautious. After hearing him out, Mingshu understood. Otani's cautions were fair. If he doesn't learn to play it cool once he has power, he'll be all dressed up with nowhere to go, Otani said, half teasing. They talked for a while. Then Otani dropped a question about Cindy, and Mingshu froze. Where had that come from? Otani sounded a little disappointed, so he went on and bluntly pointed out that Mingshu clearly had a crush on her. If Mingshu felt the same way, Otani urged he should take advantage of the opportunity. Competing in a major tournament and ending up with a girlfriend? That would be a huge win. After a few more words of encouragement, Otani cut the call. Mingshu stared at his phone, then scratched his head, left baffled and thinking about Cindy. Chapter 70. The Courts Conference Ends. In the days that followed, the tournament ran at full throttle. Mingshu won every match up to the finals, where she was finally defeated by Xiaochun, a rising star from the Yulong family. The Yulongs had deliberately built Xiaochun's momentum. Their clear aim was to capture the vacant leadership position at Tokiwa Gym. The alliance also used the courts conference's popularity to raise a great deal of money. In fact, most of this year's operating funds came from this single event. That's why the league has always pushed so hard to develop trainers. Behind every trainer is an entire industry, a chain that supports countless livelihoods and underpins the alliance itself. Otani felt a twinge of regret, but he understood as well. Mingshu couldn't be expected to close the gap overnight with competitors who had received elite training since childhood. After the match, there was an awards ceremony. Mingshu wasn't disappointed. Finishing as runner-up had already exceeded her expectations. Her original goal had been only to make the top 4. Mingshu was the only person on the podium who wasn't affiliated with the alliance. It was unusual to see someone win without any official backing or ties to the big 3, so many in the crowd stared at him, silently calculating what it would take to recruit a rising star like him. In his acceptance speech, Mingshu made a point of thanking Otani. The moment Otani's name was spoken, several spectators who had been eyeing Mingshu cooled off. Otani kept a deliberately low profile within the alliance, so much so that many people barely knew he existed. But among the major powers, he was one of the few people you did not want to cross. Hearing Mingshu single him out made everyone assume this was one of Otani's protégés, and they immediately abandoned any schemes to poach him. Xiaochun, who'd been watching, was a little surprised to learn of the connection between Mingshu and Otani. With her easygoing nature, she soon struck up a conversation with him. Mingshu didn't know Xiaochun's exact background at first, but he had a vague suspicion that she, too, must be a trainer linked to one of the major forces. When Mingshu heard that, he realized the woman was Du's cousin. Mr. Du and Mr. Otani were old friends, so she was clearly a friendly presence. Relaxed, he let his guard down and fell into an easy conversation with Xiaochun. In the audience, Cindy watched them and boiled with jealousy, her teeth clenched. For a moment, she told herself it didn't mean anything. They weren't a couple, but it still made her uncomfortable to see them laughing together. Once the award ceremony ended, Cindy moved quickly to Mingshu's side and slipped her arm through his as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Mingshu didn't pull away. Cindy had done the same thing a few days before, so it didn't strike him as strange. She shot a pointed look at Xiaochun, expecting a reaction, but Xiaochun only smiled and drew Cindy aside for a private chat. Within minutes, the two of them were joking and talking like old friends, as if they'd known each other for decades. Cindy's hostility melted away as suddenly as it had flared up. Mingshu scratched his head, unsettled by how quickly everything had changed. After the ceremony, he picked up his phone and called Otani. They talked for a while, and then Otani asked Mingshu what he planned to do next. After a moment's silence, Mingshu answered, "I'm going to continue my journey. My next stop is the Sinnoh League." Otani didn't seem surprised. Mingshu had always been a trainer at heart. "I'm glad you've made up your mind," he said, relaxing a little. "But one thing, I can't keep supplying you with free resources forever." "I understand, Mr. Otani," Mingshu replied. Otani didn't mean he was stingy. A trainer at Mingshu's level needed far more support than a casual handout could sustain. If he funded every promising trainer the way he had Mingshu, he'd soon be ruined. Besides, with Mingshu's current strength, he could take on tough Kamishu, NS at the Elf Center, and earn very good bonuses. "That said," Otani added, "I'll sell you cubes at my lowest price, and I'll give you access to buy super cubes at cost." Mingshu's face brightened at the offer. Then, almost as quickly, the memory of how astronomically expensive a supercube could be crept back in, and a worried look crossed his features. How many missions would he have to complete before he could afford one? The news was actually encouraging. The supercube could push a Pokémon through to the quasi-king level. Otani had already taught Mingshu the breakthrough techniques. What Mingshu lacked was only experience and accumulated practice. After he hung up, Otani let out a quiet breath of relief. His investment instincts had been right. The trainers he had sponsored so far were all elite, none as naturally powerful as Mingshu, but each a leader in their own circles, and none were league-affiliated. As Otani kept funding more promising trainers, their influence would grow bit by bit, slowly altering the alliance's balance of power without anyone noticing. Because the competitions were fair, the established powers couldn't legitimately object if they lost, and the chance of outright poaching was slim. No one else had what Otani had. Money alone wouldn't buy these trainers. They weren't fools, and the kinds of resources Otani could offer went far beyond cash. In that light, his plan, targeted, low profile, and well within his means, looked flawless. Otani didn't bankroll every trainer outright. Full funding was reserved for exceptional cases, someone incredibly talented who also couldn't afford to pay their own way. Right now, Mingshu was the only one who fit that bill. Other trainers were given permits to buy blocks, but those permits didn't include access to the top-tier perfect or super blocks. Only Mingshu had that special permission. In effect, he was Otani's direct protege. After spending 2 days on the Quartz Plateau, Mingshu prepared to sail for Sinnoh. Cindy insisted on coming with him no matter what. In the end, he had little choice but to agree. Xiaochun watched the two of them with an amused smile. Cindy noticed the look and, annoyed, barreled toward Xiaochun with her teeth and claws bared. Mingshu stood between them, puzzled. Just moments ago, the two women had been getting along, and now they were at each other again. On the farm, Dagu finished his work and stretched out to bask in the sun. The spring light was warm without being harsh, and it felt pleasant on his skin. Otani found himself thinking about Sinnoh. He hadn't been back in a long time. At first, he had no intention of going, but after Mingshu mentioned it, he couldn't get the idea out of his head. Dagu had always meant to travel, but repeatedly got sidetracked by other responsibilities. Now that he finally had free time, a trip made sense. Once the thought took hold, Otani couldn't shake it, and in the end, he decided they should go together. Chapter 71. Set off. Destination: Sinnoh. Otani announced the trip to everyone. His brother, who doubled as the household butler, was indifferent. Otani tried to persuade him a few times, but finally gave up. His sister, the housekeeper, on the other hand, was very interested. Xiaofei's schooling complicated things briefly. Otani decided to leave her temporarily in Grandpa Fumin's care so she could come along without missing classes. The other Pokémon had no objections. They went wherever Otani went. The three youngest Pokémon were even more eager. They couldn't wait to get out and explore. When Xiaofei came home from school, Otani told her the plan. She surprised him by not throwing a fit. In truth, she was ambivalent. She loved playing with her friends at kindergarten and wasn't especially keen on a long trip, but she didn't object to joining them either. With arrangements made, everything else fell into place. Otani felt completely at ease leaving the farm in his brother's capable hands. The recent security upgrades had made the place much safer, and the Butterfree leader on duty added another layer of protection. Satisfied that the farm was secure and everyone was accounted for, Otani prepared to set off for Sinnoh. Now that I'm still the consultant for Team Rocket, it's even less likely anyone's going to come and pick a fight with me. I just have to put up with the daily battle challenges for a while. On this trip, Otani decided he needed a proper rest, so he set the break for 1 month. After thinking about the farm for a bit, Dagu opened the group chat. Get ready. I'm heading to Sinnoh to catch a landlord. Welcome, welcome, warm welcome. Mr. Otani, are you coming by cruise ship? Don't stare at me like that. Just tell me what you want to eat. Hey! I want ice cream. Okay. Mr. Otani, you can't favor one and ignore the others. I want to go too. Stay home and train like you're supposed to. If you go out, I'll break your legs. After hanging out in the chat for a while, Otani started packing. With the help of his dear housekeeper sister, everything was tidied and cleaned quickly. He thought about what to bring, and finally decided to take a small fruit machine with him. In the end, all his things fit into a single small suitcase. Don't ask why, it was because of some cutting-edge tech. The device works like a space backpack, basically. Early the next morning, after Otani finished handing out the last of the tasks, he set off with a group of Pokémon. At the dock, we boarded a luxury cruise ship. Otani had booked first class. We stowed our luggage in the private suites he'd arranged, one for the 3 of us and another for Otani himself. Otani changed into casual clothes and slippers, then stretched out on a lounge chair on his suite's balcony, sipping juice and soaking up the sun. Musashi and Kojiro were next door, stretched out and sunbathing as well. The 3 of them wore sunglasses and made the most of the ship's complimentary drinks in their plush suite. Meowth thought that convincing Musashi and Kojiro to come along was the best move Otani had ever made in his Pokémon career. The 3 exchanged looks, silently cheering, "Long live the cadres," to themselves, then clinked glasses and drank together. Once we were underway, Otani released all the Pokémon to enjoy the open deck. Except for Flower Bebe and Sharktooth, the other Pokémon showed no interest in exploring. They settled into comfortable spots around Otani and dozed. Soon the luxury liner came to life. With a long blast of the ship's horn, it eased out of the harbor and into open water. The cruise would take 3 days, ending in Jiayuan City, often shortened to Yuan City, the largest and most prosperous city in Sinnoh. The city is sometimes called Enno, or the City of Hearts, a name that reflects its reputation as a place where people and Pokémon connect. Located in eastern Sinnoh, Jiayuan is full of Pokémon facilities, the Super Contest Arena, a bustling Pokémon Club, and the Communication Plaza. The city is being developed as a model of harmony between people and Pokémon, and was even voted the most livable city by the Sinnoh League. It hosts the region's grand contests, is famous for its pancakes, and boasts the largest trading market in all of Sinnoh. Just thinking about it made Otani buzz with anticipation. After lying around all morning, Otani couldn't stay still any longer. He got up and started wandering the decks, eager to see what the voyage and Jiayuan would bring. When he reached the bow, Otani found someone already fishing and felt the itch to try it himself. He waved over a waiter and had a set of gear brought out, then settled into an empty spot on the rail and cast his line. Not long after, he had a bite. A small crowd of curious anglers drifted over as he hauled in his catch, a Magikarp splashing and flopping in the sunlight. Otani stared at it for a moment, removed the hook, and decided against tossing his first catch back. It felt unlucky to let the first fish go. He put the Magikarp into the boat's holding tank. The spectators, seeing nothing more exciting, soon wandered off. Otani kept fishing. The next few casts produced the same result, more Magikarp. Annoyed and skeptical, he moved to a different spot and tried again. Still Magikarp. He tried yet another spot with the same outcome. When he looked into the tank and saw a little pile of Magikarp staring up at him with their trademark blank expressions, a chill ran down his spine. He didn't want any more of them on board. With a grimace, he returned them all to the sea. The scene shifted again, and Otani could hardly believe his eyes. This time it wasn't red. He felt like crying. When the shimmer faded, a golden Magikarp was flopping on the deck. Otani froze, staring at the bright, useless little fish. "Excuse me, sir. Would you be willing to give up that golden Magikarp? A well-dressed, middle-aged man asked from behind him. Otani blinked and turned. Who are you? Ah, your humble say, the man began, but before he could finish the sentence, the captain came rushing over. I'm terribly sorry to bother you, Mr. Otani, but you must release that golden Magikarp back into the sea, the captain said, breathless. It's the offspring of the Gyarados leader nearby. If you don't return it quickly, the cruise ship could be in serious danger. Without thinking much about it, Otani shoved an energy cube into the Magikarp and tossed it back into the waves. The fish vanished into the water. Thank you so much, Mr. Otani, the well-dressed man said repeatedly, bowing his thanks. I won't trouble you any further. The captain didn't linger either. In fact, he likely wouldn't have left his cabin at all if a crew member hadn't reported that someone had just hooked a golden Magikarp. The middle-aged man smiled when he couldn't buy it, then turned and walked away. Otani watched his retreating back and felt a cold prick of unease. Something about the man's aura was wrong. His ability to sense such things picked up an odd vibration. When he had thrown the golden Magikarp back into the sea, Otani had felt the faintest tingle of hostility. It had been barely there, but he was certain he hadn't imagined it. Bad luck, he thought. Of all times to run into someone like this on a trip. He hoped it wouldn't derail his plans, but he also knew he should be ready for trouble. Back at his room, Otani told his Pokémon what had happened and went over the encounter in his head. Why had that man wanted the golden Magikarp? The question nagged at him as he prepared for whatever might come next. Chapter 72. Turmoil. Nothing happened on the luxury cruise ship all day. It was as if the hostile feeling Otani had caught while fishing earlier had been a trick of the imagination. The absence of incidents only made him more uneasy. He used his powers to sweep the ship for anything suspicious, hidden weapons, tampered equipment, anything out of place, but after a careful search, he found nothing. That only increased his confusion and tension. That evening, he told Musashi and the others what he'd felt and asked them to keep an eye out for anyone acting strange. The three of them reacted as if someone had flipped a switch, suddenly buzzing with energy. Finally, they'd been given an assignment by their cadre, and they were determined not to let the team down. In an instant, windbreakers, sunglasses, and face masks seemed to materialize on them. They looked absurdly ready for a stakeout. Otani watched, half amused, half exasperated. If he hadn't known how unreliable they could be, he might have been fooled. He waved them down. You guys are just making yourselves more conspicuous. Dress like normal people. They changed back at lightning speed, which made Otani wish he had their quick change skills. When Musashi and his team were focused, they worked like professionals. Moving quietly across the dim first-floor stern, they spotted a small group loitering where few people ever went. The observation deck above blocked most of the daylight here, so this shadowed stretch usually saw only the ship's patrols. Anyone lingering now in the dark had to have planned it, and Musashi guessed they had studied the patrol schedule. Meow Meow produced a slender, stethoscope-like listening device and pressed it close to the wall to pick up their conversation. 3 voices came through, low and cautious. I might be at risk of being exposed, one said. What happened? Another asked. The first gave a short account. It's probably fine. Even a trainer wouldn't be suspicious without reason. You didn't do anything obvious. Suspicion is just suspicion. Keep hiding. We've still got time. Okay, came the reply. What's the next move? The third asked. Every cabin's been checked. There's no good place to put it, the first answered. That's a hassle, the second said, but not a major problem. Just keep carrying it with you. There was a pause, and then the 3 fell silent. Musashi held his breath, listening for anything more, but the whispers had stopped. Tomorrow the cruise ship will officially leave the Alliance area and enter international waters. We have half an hour to act. Brief the brothers. Understood. Understood. The patrol's coming. Disperse. The 3 of them melted out of the shadows as if nothing had happened, never noticing the trio concealed on the overhead beams. When Meow Meow heard that last line, the patrol's coming, she didn't hesitate. She sprinted back to Otani and relayed what she'd heard. Otani felt a pressure behind his eyes. 3 ringleaders, he thought. One was confirmed, the other 2 identities were still unknown, and the number of people they'd recruited was unclear. What could they do in 30 minutes? There was a very real chance one of those men was carrying a bomb. If they launched a reckless attack, they'd leave the enemy no choice but to fight to the death. He couldn't hide his frustration. How could the security on such a high-end cruise be this lax? They'd all gone through strict checks before boarding. It should have been impossible to smuggle an explosive aboard. The only explanation left was an insider, someone already on the ship who had secreted a device in advance. That explained how such a serious breach could occur despite the ship's tight security. Otani had planned to take the matter straight to the captain, but now he hesitated. What if the captain was one of the insiders? Telling him would be the same as revealing that they'd been discovered. It was a nightmare. Of all times to run into this, why, while they were traveling? They needed contingency plans for both possibilities. Otani met with Shi and the others to discuss options. Meow Meow thumped his chest, vowed he would get it done, and then hurried off with Yuyue and Kojiro, all eager to act. They agreed to move tomorrow, aiming to be in open waters by noon. Otani decided to rest and recharge. Whether Meow Meow and the others could pull off a miracle overnight remained to be seen. If they failed, he could always handle the problem with force. After all, inexperienced though he might be, he was still a king-level trainer. The next morning, Dagu woke up groggy. He hadn't slept well. Fortunately, the trio had finished their task in time. Yesterday, Otani had asked them to build, on short notice, a device that could jam the radio signals used to trigger bombs, something powerful enough to cover the entire ship. Kojiro had smiled and said, "Boss, I guarantee it will work. We already tested it yesterday." Otani had no reply then, only a tight, relieved smile. If the jammer hadn't worked, he thought, you'd probably already be lined up downstairs. Now he stood on the balcony, looking out over the full length of the deck. Everything was in place. All that remained was to wait for the actors to take the stage. The cruise ship eased out into open water. "Have you reached the contact on the phone?" one of the men asked. "Boss, I can't make the call. I don't know why." "What?" The word was sharp. "That's bad. We may have been exposed. Don't wait until we're in the middle of the ocean. Move now." Bang, bang, bang. 3 flares shot into the sky. A few passengers looked up in confusion. Others, more alert, stiffened and scanned the deck. "No one move," a voice barked. A group of men stepped forward, faces hard. With a single motion, they opened their coats, revealing bombs strapped to their bodies. The flares had been the signal to the accomplices waiting outside. Now the operation was underway. "Remember, the plan changed. Move fast," the leader barked, then signaled his men. They released their Pokémon, all water types, sleek and menacing as they slid into the waves. "We're not here to hurt anyone. We just want your money," the leader called across the deck. "Cooperate and no one gets hurt. Don't," and he let the threat hang in the air, sneering as he gestured for his crew to round up the passengers and collect their valuables. Speedboats closed in and ringed the cruise ship. The captain glared at his first mate. The man stood ashamed, head down. "I'm sorry," he stammered. "I'm sorry. I owe a loan shark. I couldn't refuse." Nobody on the deck noticed that Otani's Pokémon had already begun to move. Beneath the surface, his Gyarados had made contact with a nearby group, a call that the others answered in an instant. Gyarados are fiercely loyal to one another. When one is threatened, the rest converge. Within moments, they surged as one, tearing through the water and smashing the speedboats to splinters. The startled attackers were thrown back. Screams and the sounds of ruptured hulls filled the air. On the ship, it would soon be Otani's turn to be searched. He watched, alert, as the leader's expression shifted from smug triumph to unease. The leader was shouting to his men now, pointing toward the side of the boat. "Someone's not where they should be. Check it out." Why didn't the person who was supposed to come up make it? While everyone else was distracted, Otani acted. Venusaur, Kentaro, Raiden, and the other Pokémon struck at once. They quickly overwhelmed the attacker's Pokémon and forced the assailants into submission. Otani handed all the collected bombs to Venusaur, who lashed out with a vine whip and hurled them over the side of the ship. The moment the explosives cleared the hull, they detonated, far enough away that no one aboard was hurt. With the greatest danger gone, Otani took charge. He ordered the passengers to tie up the captured group, have trainers recall any incapacitated Pokémon into their Pokéballs, and lock the balls to prevent further use. Then he instructed everyone to wait for the professional Ellis to arrive. Authorities from Sinnoh and Kanto reached the ship almost simultaneously. Otani gave a brief account of what had happened and handed the matter over to them. Once the official teams had taken over, there was nothing left for him to do. The captain came up to Otani and the other passengers to express his gratitude. "Mr. Otani, thank you so much. I don't know what we would have done today without you." "It's what any citizen of the Union should do," Otani replied. Despite Otani's protestations, the captain insisted on covering all expenses as a token of thanks. Otani reluctantly accepted. The next few days were unusually calm, and the cruise pulled into Jiayuan City right on schedule. Still, when we reached the pier, something felt off. The dock was packed with people. Why were so many gathered there? Chapter 73, A Different Scenery. Otani stared at the dock, already packed with people, and felt a little bewildered. What was going on? Why were so many people gathered here? As the boat drew closer, he spotted Sirona and immediately understood she was surrounded. As the Sinnoh champion, Sirona was a huge public figure in the region, and with Macaulay standing at her side, the crowd made sense. Otani felt awkward. Why were they making such a fuss? He wasn't used to this kind of attention. Before he could decide whether to disembark somewhere else, Sirona's sharp eyes found him. "Otani, Otani, over here," she waved enthusiastically, holding up a welcome sign that read, "Welcome Mr. Otani, the world's best cook." Macaulay stood beside her, smiling and waving as well. The noisy dock fell suddenly quiet at that sight, then buzzed with even louder conversation. "Mr. Otani got Sirona and Macaulay to come pick him up? I'm so jealous. I've never even heard of this Otani fellow. Who is he?" "Wow, Mr. Otani?" Otani hesitated on the gangplank, cheeks warming as cameras clicked and people craned to get a better look. He hadn't expected such a reception. Fans screamed until the dock rang. "Otani is so handsome," someone yelled. "Sirona, Sirona, Sirona! Macaulay, Macaulay, you're the best, Macaulay, Macaulay!" The noise made Otani's ears buzz. He felt uncomfortably exposed. He forced himself to step down the ship's plush gangway, and the three of them hurried off the pier under the escort of bodyguards. The crowd control team finally let out a collective sigh of relief when they were gone. Once inside the car, Otani managed a wry smile. "You two are way too high profile. I was on the boat for a second thinking about jumping in and swimming ashore somewhere else." Sirona laughed outright. Macaulay gave a rueful smile. "We meant to be low-key about picking you up, honestly. But we got recognized, so we decided to make a scene and wait for you out in the open." Otani blinked. How are you trying to disguise yourselves?" Both Sirona and Macaulay produced sunglasses and slipped them on in perfect sync. Otani looked at them, speechless. Of course they'd been recognized. They all looked at one another and burst out laughing. The car pulled up to a high-end restaurant in Jiayuan City, and as the host Sirona made a point of entertaining Otani, the three of them settled into a private room. "How long are you staying in Sinnoh?" Macaulay asked between mouthfuls of roast. Otani set down his cutlery and wiped his mouth. "About a month." "Perfect timing," Macaulay said, smiling. "In a week, Jiayuan City is holding the super gorgeous competition. Here, this is an invitation for special guests. You should come and see it." Otani accepted the invitation and put it away carefully. "Since you invited me personally, I'll be there." Macaulay grinned at the reply. They chatted comfortably for a while longer. After dinner, they returned to the hotel Sirona had booked. Macaulay said his goodbyes and left. He still had to attend to various arrangements for the competition and rehearse the opening. Sirona collapsed lazily onto the sofa. Otani watched her for a moment, a little curious. "As the Sinnoh League champion, shouldn't you be as busy as Watari? Why are you just sitting there like you've got nothing to do?" Sirona's voice had that half-teasing, half-accusing edge. Otani paid her no mind and kept cleaning the room. Even as he worked, he could feel a pair of eyes on him. When he glanced up, Sirona was turned away, pretending not to look. She whistled softly, like it was nothing. Otani blinked. "What are you doing? It's just the two of us here." A faint flush crossed her face. She lowered her voice. "You promised before. Ice cream." That jogged his memory. he had agreed, in the group, to make her ice cream. He paused, thought for a moment, then went to find the hotel waiter and asked if he could use the kitchen. Because Otani was staying in the best private suite, the waiter didn't hesitate. He led Otani through the back and into the hotel kitchen. The kitchen was a hive of activity. Chefs shouted orders, pans clanged, and steam curled into the air. The head chef shot Otani an impatient look when he arrived. Then, after a brief exchange with the waiter, nodded curtly. The waiter showed Otani to an empty prep table and hovered nearby, ready to help if needed. Otani scanned the ingredients, grabbed some eggs and milk, and set to work with calm, practiced motions. The head chef watched from the side, at first with barely concealed amusement. To him, Otani looked like one of the rich idol types who dabble in hobbies to pass the time, but the more he looked, the less amused he became. A layman might have seen only someone excitedly making ice cream. An expert notices the small things. As head chef of the finest luxury hotel in Jiaoyuan City, he had the trained eye to pick up those details. Otani measured, whisked, and heated with exact timing and confident control. Every step deliberate, every movement economical. The chef realized this wasn't the clumsy experimentation of an amateur. He stopped looking down on Otani and watched, increasingly absorbed. Otani worked smoothly, his rhythm almost hypnotic. The waiter, however, didn't catch the technical subtleties. He only saw the chef's expression change. Something about it struck him as odd, even lecherous, and he instinctively stepped a few paces away, puzzled. In under half an hour, Otani had turned out a selection of ice creams in different flavors. He eagerly offered them to the chef and the waitstaff. One taste and they were won over. The flavor, texture, and balance were flawless. Suddenly it hit me. Every other ice cream I'd ever had was trash compared to this. I had a food truck bring the order up to our room, and when Sharona saw it, she couldn't take her eyes off the tray. Then she went all indecisive again. Kind of cute, actually. Sharona, what are you staring at? Eat it before it melts, I said. Wait a minute, she murmured. I don't know which one to try first. I want them all. You have trouble making decisions, I asked. Trouble with choices, she repeated, puzzled. Yeah, every time I eat ice cream, I always struggle between strawberry and original. I couldn't help laughing a little. I hadn't expected that side of her. Don't worry, it's all yours. If you want, I can have the hotel pack the rest, so you can take them home and eat them slowly. She made up her mind at last and went for her favorite, strawberry. She scooped up a generous bite and popped it into her mouth. The sweet taste hit her tongue, and Sharona closed her eyes in delight. She'd barely finished when she remembered to take a picture. She pulled out her phone, snapped a few shots, then dug back in for another bite. Just as the spoon touched her lips, the phone buzzed. She glanced at the caller ID. Her smile faltered for a second, but she still answered. A weary male voice came through. Hirona, seriously, are you the champion or am I? I'm buried in league work. I don't even have time to sleep. I'm practically losing my hair, and you're out there eating ice cream. Don't be mad, Wusong, she said, still smiling. I brought you some. Wusong sighed loudly on the other end. He really had rotten luck to be matched with a champion like her. But there was nothing he could do. He couldn't beat her. After a few more complaints, he hung up, returning to his never-ending tasks and muttering about being born to work. Sharona, meanwhile, posted the ice cream photos to her close friends' group chat and immediately set off a cheerful teasing thread. It was almost unbelievable how animated she'd become. Whether Otani had taught her that or not, she'd clearly grown into a shamelessly happy chatterbox. I helped her put the ice cream in the mini-fridge in our room, then left Sharona to her own devices and stepped out for a walk. Some people say that traveling is just moving from a place you're tired of to a place someone else is tired of. I've always thought that made sense. We're endlessly curious about unfamiliar places. Jiaoyuan City felt like the most comfortable place in Sinnoh. Faces here wore easy, genuine smiles, and it was contagious. I found myself relaxing before I even realized it. I wandered until I reached a small park near the hotel, let my Pokémon out to roam, and sank into a bench to watch people drift by. Sharona joined me and sat down beside me, eyes bright with interest as she watched my Pokémon explore the grass. Hey, Otani, she said after a moment, leaning forward. Want to have a battle? Chapter 74. Battle. Sharona's power. When Otani accepted Sharona's invitation to spar, he felt a thrill of excitement. Matches against the champion didn't come along every day. It was a rare chance to see exactly how far he still had to go. Without thinking twice, he agreed. The battle, however, was over before he knew it. Sharona's Garchomp, the land shark, was terrifyingly strong. Whatever fancy combinations Otani tried, Garchomp simply smashed through them with overwhelming force. By the end, all 6 of Otani's Pokémon had been knocked out. He had expected a gap between them, but not one this wide. Otani sat in the Pokémon Center waiting area in stunned silence. Sharona sat across from him, calm as ever. "Otani," she said, "do you know why you lost so badly?" He hesitated. "Why?" Sharona smiled slightly. "Your Pokémon are very well trained. In terms of individual conditioning, they're excellent. That's not the problem. The problem is how you command in battle. You overthink things and give too many orders. To be blunt, you don't trust your Pokémon enough." Otani looked puzzled. Sharona noticed and rephrased more clearly. "You give them a play-by-play instead of letting them act," she explained. "When you clutter a fight with constant instructions, you stifle their instincts and synergy. Strong Pokémon need a trainer's guidance, but they also need freedom to respond to the moment. Simplify your commands. Believe in their judgment. Read the situation and give them the space to do what they do best." Her tone was gentle but direct, and Otani felt both chastened and relieved. It was something he could actually work on. "Let me put it this way, Otani. You've protected them too much." Otani blinked, coming slowly to his senses. Compared to Sharona's Pokémon, his had been like flowers kept in a greenhouse. "Your tactics are very refined," she went on, "but your Pokémon lack battle autonomy and flexibility. That's a problem. A trainer is important in a fight, but the real protagonist is always the Pokémon." Otani listened intently as she spoke. "You and your Pokémon share a deep bond, but something's missing. You don't trust them completely. Don't confine yourself to tactical rules. At your level, tactics shouldn't be the deciding factor." He thought it over, then bowed his head. "Thank you, Sharona," he said sincerely. Sharona smiled faintly. "You'll come to understand this on your own in time," she replied. "I'm only pointing them out so you're prepared," Sharona said. "If it weren't for your guidance, it would have taken me a long time to understand," Otani replied, his voice thick with feeling. Sharona didn't deny it. Nurse Joy soon rolled a cart over to help deliver the Pokéballs. After Otani stowed them away and thanked her, he and Sharona left the Poké Center. Back at the hotel, Sharona took an ice cream from the fridge, offered a brief smile, said goodbye, and left. Alone in his room, Otani replayed Sharona's words. His fighting style had always been overly cautious. That cautiousness wasn't entirely bad, but if he kept avoiding head-on confrontations, he would never develop the resolve needed to win decisively. Determined to change, he decided he'd find a chance to face Sharona again tomorrow. He released Bulbasaur and the rest of his team into the hotel's large private suite. There was plenty of room, even with all the Pokémon out. Otani relayed everything Sharona had pointed out. When he finished, Venusaur was silent for a moment, then gave a slow, approving nod. At first he hadn't noticed it, but after thinking it over, he realized there really was a problem. Otani, Bulbasaur, and the rest spent the evening going over today's battle, looking for what had gone wrong. The next morning, Sharona seemed to know he would challenge her again. She was waiting at the hotel lobby when Otani came downstairs. She sat drinking coffee, relaxed and unperturbed. Otani went straight up to her and explained the situation. Sharona smiled and accepted his challenge without hesitation. They headed to the park for the rematch. Sharona sent out her trump card, a Garchomp she called Land Shark. Otani answered by sending out Venusaur. "You can go first, Otani," Sharona said with a polite smile. Otani nodded. "Venusaur Leaf Blade." Venusaur's leaves whirled into sharp spinning blades and shot toward Garchomp. Garchomp looked down on the attack with obvious disdain. With a single sweep of its claws, it tore the flying leaves to shreds. "Garchomp, Dragon Rush," Sharona ordered. "Venusaur, hold on," Otani shouted. Garchomp launched itself at terrifying speed, a coiled, unstoppable force, and bore straight toward Venusaur. Venusaur's Protect shimmered in front of it, but Garchomp's assault tore through the field anyway, dragging Venusaur across the dirt and leaving a long gouge behind. Otani gave a bitter smile. That kind of power, Could he possibly beat an opponent like this? Otani, face me properly. I won't hold back next time, Sirona sneered. Land Shark, Dragon Dive, again! Otani's jaw hardened. He steeled himself and ordered Venusaur to stop evading and charge straight ahead. Venusaur, full power solar beam. Venusaur braced on all four legs and unleashed a blinding column of light from its mouth. The beam lanced straight at Garchomp, but the dragon didn't flinch or dodge. It surged through the solar beam, Dragon Dive driving it forward, closing the distance toward Venusaur despite the attack. Otani felt his throat go dry, watching the two titans collide. Sirona's face was cold. Otani, you disappoint me. If this is the best you can do, I've really misjudged you. Her words stung, but they steadied Otani rather than breaking him. He inhaled, then let out a shout he rarely used. Venusaur, show them our bond. Push it harder. Put everything into it. No, now. Venusaur answered to Otani's feelings. He'd already been pushed to his limit, but somehow he dug deeper and exploded with fresh power. Otani felt a long-dormant passion surge back to life as Venusaur's solar beam intensified. The blast struck Garchomp squarely and sent the dragon tumbling. The battlefield erupted in smoke and debris. Otani stayed on guard. He didn't expect Garchomp to be finished so easily. When the dust cleared, the land shark was only slightly shaken, barely a scratch on its hide. That's it. Otani, respond to your Pokémon with your heart. You'll see a whole different world, he told himself, stealing his focus. Across the clearing, Garchomp's trainer barked in order. A fierce aura flared from Garchomp, its scarlet eyes burned with renewed ferocity. Garchomp, get serious, Dragon Dive, again! Garchomp dove with world-shredding momentum straight for Venusaur. Otani shouted back, voice raw with determination. Vulpes, trust our bond. Destroy that death ray. Venusaur roared, drew in a concentrated column of energy, and fired the solar beam straight at the oncoming Garchomp. Garchomp paid no mind to the destruction ray. Like a blade through wire, it sliced the beam clean in two and slammed straight into Venusaur. Venusaur hung in the air for a beat as if struck by a cannonball, then tumbled backward and smashed into the arena wall, leaving a deep gouge. The land shark roared up at the sky, eyes bright with the thrill of battle. This was exactly the fight she had wanted. Otani stared toward the wreckage where Venusaur lay, worry etched on his face. Venusaur wasn't down for long. She forced herself up, struggling to stand. Venusaur, are you all right? Otani called. Venusaur answered with a stubborn bellow. All right then, Otani said. Sirona finally allowed herself a small smile. Respond to our bond, Garchomp. Dragon Rush! With a feral cry, Garchomp surged forward, charging like a living missile. Venusaur, full power, solar beam. Because she was a grass type and badly hurt, Venusaur's power flared. Drawing on every last reserve, she poured her energy into the attack. The solar beam that erupted was far denser and more intense than before, twice as thick, a blinding shaft of light aimed straight at the charging Garchomp. When Landshark saw that, excite meant flashed across his face. He charged headlong into the column of light. For a moment there was a stalemate, but Garchomp kept inching closer to Bulbasaur. Vulpecula! Hold on! Someone shouted. Bulbasaur's eyes were hard with resolve. His body, now fully that of a Venusaur, locked and pushed. Venusaur forced every limb, and the solar beam swelled in power. Landshark staggered, almost knocked off his feet, but he steadied himself instantly and continued closing on Venusaur. If he couldn't stand up to a strong enemy, how could he protect everything he loved? Dig deep. This isn't your limit. We have to live up to Xiaoyu's faith in us. Get back here, you little... Venusaur poured even more energy into the attack. The solar beam flared brighter and more intense. At last, Landshark's steady forward momentum faltered. Sirona broke into a bright smile. Gristle, let's show them what we've got. Don't let anyone underestimate our bond. At her command, Garchomp's energy surged again. The two forces collided at the center of the field. A roaring wind spread outward in every direction. Otani forced himself to steady his legs and fixed his gaze on Venusaur. He trusted the Pokémon would not fail him. A strong wind lifted Sirona's skirt and whipped her long, golden hair into the air. For a moment she looked like a goddess of war. Her aura braided together with Tyrannosaurus Rex's, so closely aligned they seemed to be a single being. Watching that, Otani understood something. He poured his mental energy into Venusaur. The moment his mind touched the Pokémons, the world changed. Colors sharpened, sounds altered, and Otani found himself sharing a consciousness. He whispered inwardly, "Is this what you see, Sharona?" He felt Venusaur's feelings as clearly as his own. Venusaur felt his. It was the power of the bond. "Bulbasaur, I'll fight beside you this time," he sent, and pushed every scrap of his telepathic strength into Venusaur. The Pokémon swelled with power. Landshark did not yield. When their energies collided, black lightning lanced through the air and a thunderous explosion ripped outward. Pain cracked through Otani's skull. He staggered, nearly collapsing under the force of it. The world in front of him slowly snapped back into focus. He brought a hand to his nose and felt the tacky warmth of blood, just a thin trickle. Otani ignored it and scanned the battlefield with concern. A gust of wind swept the smoke and dust aside. Garchomp still stood firm in the arena. Not far off, Bulbasaur lay battered and unable to continue. Otani climbed down from the stage and went to Bulbasaur's side. He returned it to its Pokéball and, almost to himself, murmured, "Thank you, Venusaur." Sharona came up behind him and gave his shoulder a gentle pat. As Otani turned, a wave of dizziness hit him. Everything went black at the edges of his vision, and then he toppled backwards, blood pouring from his nose. "Otani!" Sharona grabbed him and steadied him in her arms. No need for a melodramatic description of him collapsing into Sharona's embrace. For a moment she panicked, but she collected herself, folded Otani into a secure hold, leapt onto Garchomp, and they raced straight for the Pokémon Center. When Otani finally opened his eyes again, he was lying on a hospital bed. His skull throbbed as if 1,000 needles were pricking at it. It took him several breathless moments to come fully to himself and take in his surroundings, the sterile white of a hospital room. Sharona was dozing on the couch beside him when a large head suddenly appeared over the backrest, making Otani start. It was the landshark, Liao Lucia. Otani shot the creature an annoyed look. Lucia gave him an apologetic wag of the head and leaned toward Sharona as if to wake her, but Otani gently held Lucia back and shook his head, signaling that Sharona should keep sleeping. Lucia didn't protest and settled down. The ward door opened abruptly. Macaulay stepped in and let out a relieved breath when he saw Otani sitting up. "What on earth? I step out for a little aisle and end up in a hospital," he said, bewildered. Otani managed a wry smile and, not wanting to make a long story of it, quickly explained the fight with Sharona. Macaulay went quiet for a moment, then looked at him with a mix of disbelief and admiration. "You're the first person I've ever heard of who got hospitalized after a fight." Just then Nurse Joy came in and, seeing that Dagu had woken, hurried over to check on him. A few of the others in the room shot Otani disapproving looks. "You have to take care of yourself," Nurse Joy scolded. "That was reckless. You used your mental powers to interfere in a Pokémon battle without authorization. If you hadn't been brought here in time, even if you'd survived, you would have been a fool for the rest of your life." There was nothing Otani could say to that. He hadn't known the consequences would be so severe, but even if given the choice again, he would have done the same thing. Sharona stirred at the sound of Miss Joy's voice. Miss Joy didn't care who you were. If she caught you, she would give both of them a proper scolding. Otani had the feeling she could have kept up that reprimand for another hour or two without stopping. When Miss Joy finally left, both Otani and Sharona let out the same relieved sigh and laughed at once. Macaulay watched them, speechless. Now that he was sure everything was all right, he had to rush back to the super gorgeous competition venue. There were still too many things left for him to do. After exchanging quick goodbyes, he hurried off. "Otani, have you realized your bond?" Sharona asked softly as she sat down beside the bed. Otani nodded. "Thank you, Sharona." She smiled faintly. "That's good. Your stay in the hospital wasn't in vain." Otani laughed, but then his expression suddenly changed. The laughter from a little while ago hit a nerve and my head started to throb again. It took me a moment to steady myself. Seeing that, Sharona stood up, gave a brief wave, and said, "Tell Otani to get some rest," before leaving. Just then the housekeeper's younger sister came in from outside. She shot Sharona an unmistakably displeased look, but Sharona didn't seem to care. She only waved at me and walked away. The housekeeper immediately launched into another round of scolding. I rubbed my nose awkwardly, feeling a strange warmth in my chest despite the reprimand. The other Pokémon filed into the ward and gathered around, their faces full of concern. My nose throbbed. Small pain, I told myself. If getting hurt meant protecting you, it was worth it. The housekeeper's sister hustled everyone out after that, afraid they'd disturb my rest, and there was nothing I could do to stop her. I came here expecting a pleasant trip and ended up stuck in bed for 3 days. I'm speechless. Who am I supposed to complain to about this? Chapter 75, Discharge and Exchange Meeting. After spending another day in bed at the Pokémon Center, Nurse Joy finally cleared Otani to leave following a careful examination. She fussed over him the whole time, repeating the same instructions: don't overwork, rest, go to bed early, and get up early. He agreed to each admonition one by one, but when her concern grew into a weight he couldn't stand, he found an excuse and slipped out. The weather was bright and sunny. Otani walked slowly down the street, stretching and letting himself wander. To avoid causing a scene, he put the larger Pokémon back into their Pokéballs before moving on. Since the battle with Serona, Bulbasaur hadn't woken. Nurse Joy had checked him repeatedly and assured Otani that there was nothing physically wrong, which was the only reason she'd allowed him to be discharged. She suggested that Bulbasaur simply didn't want to wake yet. Perhaps he was in the middle of some kind of transformation, maybe even beginning to evolve toward Venusaur. Otani kept walking, thinking of that sleeping little partner and of the next steps ahead. Otani walked along the road with his Pokémon at his side and pulled the travel guide the port officials had handed him out of his backpack. His first stop in Jiayuan City was the Exchange Plaza. The Exchange Conference, often called the Interaction Conference, was one of the city's highlights. Trainers released their Pokémon there to mingle freely, trade tips, and swap training methods. Nothing like it existed back in the Kanto region. Maybe, Otani thought, he could try to set up something similar when he went home. He collected his thoughts and headed toward the plaza. Pokémon wandered freely along the streets. Some were playing together, while others simply lazed in the sun. A few upbeat locals waved and called out friendly greetings as he passed. Otani smiled and answered each one. What a beautiful place. By noon, he reached the Exchange Plaza in the northern part of Jiayuan City. The square buzzed with activity, trainers from all over the world coming and going, talking and comparing notes. Otani stepped into the crowd and released all his Pokémon. Every Pokémon Otani raised looked exceptionally well. Their physical development far outpaced that of their peers. Many trainers paused in surprise when they saw his team, though no one pressed him about it. Interactions here were entirely voluntary. A huge swimming pool filled the center of the plaza, and dozens of water-type Pokémon lounged at its edge. Gyarados wasted no time diving in. Technically, it could stay out of water for long periods, but why crawl along the shore when you could be in the pool? Otani sank into a chair by the water to rest. He was still stiff from the long walk and felt a little tired. His sharp-toothed landshark watched him with concern. "Gah!" it murmured. Otani smiled. "I'm fine, Sharktooth. I'm not made of glass. Just sit with me for a bit." He pulled a bottle of water from his pack and took a long drink. Color returned to his face almost immediately. A young trainer, clearly nervous, finally mustered the courage to approach. "Excuse me, could I ask you a few questions?" The boy looked like he'd picked Jian City as his first stop on a journey. Otani returned the smile. "Sure, go ahead," he said kindly. "Thank you so much. My home is in Jiayuan City. My name is Daji. Please, I need your help." "I'm Otani," he replied, inclining his head. "I'm from the Kanto region." "Mr. Otani, it's like this," Daji said, rushing on. "My relationship with my Pokémon is not good. He never listens to me. He keeps disobeying my orders, and it's tearing me up inside. Do you have any advice?" Otani smiled faintly. "Call the Pokémon over. Let me take a look." Daji turned and called in a high, worried voice. "Boga! Boga!" The little bird shot over and, without ceremony, jabbed Daji on the head with its tiny beak. "Oh, Pokémon, stop that! I'm sorry! I'm sorry!" Daji crouched, rubbing her scalp. Only then did the Pokémon calm down. It folded its small wings across its chest, turned its back, and gave Daji the cold shoulder. Otani crouched down to be eye level with the creature and spoke to it in a soft, sing-song voice. "Boga! Boga! Boga! Boga!" The Pokémon answered in a torrent of indignant chirps and peeps, as if unloading a long grievance. Otani listened, letting the noises run on until the bird finally slowed. He couldn't suppress a small, amused smile. "It wasn't always like this," he said quietly, translating for Dodgy. "You two used to be closer, but lately you've been sloppy and careless. You leave things half-finished, and he's always the one to clean up after you. That breeds resentment." Dodgy's face fell. The truth of it landed harder than she'd expected. The Pokémon, still turned away, shifted its weight as if to punctuate Otani's words. Otani's smile softened. "Don't worry, it's not beyond repair. The first step is understanding how he feels." Otani had been watching their practice matches for a while, and something kept bothering him. The instructions during battle never seemed to make sense. Whenever Dodgy called the shots, they kept getting beaten. After losing one match too many, Pokémon quietly decided he couldn't rely on Dodgy's calls in combat. Otani pulled Dodgy aside to talk. Dodgy looked hurt more than angry. He really tried to follow Pokémon's lead, but their timing was always off. Every little mistake seemed to set Pokémon off, and Pokémon's frustration only made Dodgy more anxious and prone to error. Hearing that, Otani finally understood their problem. Both of them had issues, but they were different. Dodgy was talented but lacked confidence. He second-guessed himself and froze under pressure. Pokémon was proud and impatient, the sort of Pokémon who won't tolerate a trainer or partner he doesn't respect. But he genuinely cared for Dodgy and was as tough as they come. Otani called them both together and laid out a plan. He brought in the sharp-toothed land shark as a sparring partner and began running coordination drills designed to build trust and timing. The exercises were simple at first: call and response moves, slow sequences that forced them to wait for each other, and controlled sparring where mistakes wouldn't be punished. Dodgy's talent showed through, as he learned quickly when he wasn't panicking. Pogamon's impatience still flared sometimes, but Otani made sure to reinforce every small success, which helped ease the tension between them. It wasn't an instant fix, but under Otani's guidance, the two began to find a rhythm. Dodgy's confidence grew a little each session, and Pogamon's sharp edges softened whenever he saw Dodgy improving. With Otani acting as translator, the two of them finally understood one another and made up. Dodgy was overjoyed and thanked Otani. Pokémon, trying to act all grown-up, scowled at Dodgy's timid posture and proceeded to give her a rapid string of pecks, half scold, half affection. "Dodgy, stand up straight. Be confident," he ruffled. Otani smiled. "All right, Mr. Otani." Dodgy lifted her chin and answered more loudly this time. Pokémon nodded in satisfied approval, and the two little ones set off together. "Pokémon, can I relax a little? This is kind of tiring," Dodgy asked as they walked. "Boga boga," Pokémon replied. "Just for a moment, only a little while," she pushed. "Boga, boga, boga boga," he insisted. All right, she laughed. Dagu watched them grow smaller in the distance and smiled, sending a quiet blessing after them. After sitting a moment, Otani decided it was time to move on. Their next stop was the Baofen cooking kitchen. Jiayuan City was the designated host for the super gorgeous competition. Almost everyone here loved the grand contest, and as a result, the townspeople were all skilled at making bofens, the local specialty. The Pokémon cooking kitchen also rents its professional equipment to outside coordination trainers who want to prepare dishes to boost their Pokémon. You just pay a small usage fee, and you can work on the salon's top-notch stoves and utensils. Otani arrived at the door of the Baofen cooking kitchen just as it was getting crowded. With the super gorgeous contest coming up, a steady stream of coordinators had turned up to practice and polish their entries. The room was full of clattering pans, fragrant steam, and excited chatter. He almost walked past an old acquaintance. "Mingshu, what are you doing here?" Otani said, clapping him on the shoulder. Mingshu spun around and broke into a smile. He looked pleased to see Otani, though a little shy. "I'm here with Cindy. We're entering the super gorgeous contest. Cindy's here making a Baofen. I'm also planning to challenge the Jiayuan City Gym while I'm in town." "Oh, so that's it. Looks like you finally made up your mind. Good for you." Before Mingshu could reply, Cindy cried out in embarrassment from a nearby counter. "Oh no, it's ruined. Mingshu, help me." She was holding what should have been a perfect Baofen, but it had gone black around the edges. A lump of charcoal where a prize entry should have been. Otani held back. This was clearly a couple moment, and he didn't want to intrude. He stepped aside and let them fuss over each other, feeling like the third wheel. Still, watching everyone else bustling about, turning out batch after batch of sparkling baofens, Otani's hands started to itch. He'd come to watch and maybe lend a hand, but now he found himself itching to try one of those burners for himself. The kitchen soul couldn't hold back any longer. Finding an empty patch of counter, they set to work making baofen. The process was simple. First, they squeezed and strained the juice from the required fruit, then mixed it with flour in the right proportions, kneaded it into a dough, let it rest, divided it into portions, shaped them, and slid them into the oven. Otani moved with smooth, practiced motions. A batch of basic baofen was ready in no time, and the scent drifting through the room was mouth-watering. Otani picked one up, took a bite, and said with a satisfied smile, delicious, as expected. Mingshu, at a loss and unfamiliar with the technique, could only look to Otani for guidance. Rather than go help Cindy directly, Otani began teaching Mingshu the crucial moments when the dough needed to rest during the process. Mingshu took notes earnestly, writing everything down. When he finished, Otani patted him on the shoulder and said, "I've done all I can. The rest is up to you, kid." Chapter 76. The Super Gorgeous Competition begins. Over the next few days, Otani wandered all over Jiayuan City, with Mingshu and Cindy trailing him everywhere. He didn't object, but at times their constant presence felt a little too conspicuous. Finally, Mingshu took his leave. He had to stay with Cindy to rehearse their moves, and Otani let out a relieved sigh. Mingshu had originally wanted him to come along, but Otani had declined, saying he didn't know how to coordinate the choreography. He couldn't help mentally scolding himself. Really? Couldn't he see the look of resentment on Cindy's face? How did a normally sharp guy go so dumb at a moment like that? Now, alone, Otani sipped coffee atop an observation tower in Jiayuan. Through the glass he could see the tall, majestic Tianguan Mountains, their peaks capped with permanent snow, sheer cliffs plunging away, and a dense forest unfurling across the foothills. For a second, the ridgeline oddly suggested the silhouette of a middle-aged, balding man, an absurd image that flashed through his mind and was dismissed almost as quickly. The day of the Super Gorgeous contest had finally arrived. Otani reached the venue early. Because he had a special invitation and used the VIP entrance, he didn't have to stand in the long queue. Heads turned and eyes followed as he passed, the kind of looks that said everyone wished they were him as he walked into the event. Before he could take everything in, Macaulay and a squad of staff materialized and closed in around him. They shepherded Otani straight to the dressing room. Ignoring his protests, they began applying makeup and pulling new clothes from racks. Otani was bewildered, but there was no real choice. He let them work. When they were done, a stranger stared back at him from the mirror. A clean, elegant suit and a fashionable haircut had transformed him into a strikingly handsome young man. He still hadn't quite registered the change when Macaulay snapped a photo with his phone and saved it. "Perfect," Macaulay said. Macaulay lifted Otani's chin and studied him closely. Otani felt suddenly self-conscious. "You don't have to be so dramatic, Macaulay," he mumbled. Macaulay shook his head. "No, I'm a perfectionist. I want everything to be as good as it can be." He glanced at his watch. "Okay, Otani, it's almost time. Go upstairs and find your seat." Macaulay waved and motioned to the staff to escort Otani to the special guest area. Otani had assumed special guest meant a plush box seat until they led him straight to the referee's chair. A placard on the table read, "Special guest, Otani." He stared for a moment. So that was it. Macaulay had actually volunteered him to act as the referee. Otani hadn't agreed, but it seemed there was no backing out now. He took a breath, smoothed his expression, and forced a smile as he greeted the people seated beside him. On his left was Miss Joy from the Elf Center. Next to her sat a short, balding, middle-aged man. On his right was a woman in a purple evening gown with an unusual hairstyle, someone he recognized from the event brochure. She was Miss Melissa, the gym leader from Jiayuan City, a specialist in ghost-type Pokémon and the holder of the relic badge. "Oh, hello, Mr. Otani," Miss Melissa said. "Ah, hello, Miss Melissa," Otani replied, trying to sound composed. "We were all wondering who Macaulay's special guest would be," Miss Joy said with a smile. "Yeah, the balding man added. We didn't expect it would be you, Mr. Otani. Are you feeling better? Thank you for your concern, Miss Joy. I'm feeling much better now. Ha ha, Mr. Ra. Otani is really young and promising. Already a top breeder at such an age, someone said. Hello, Mr. Mayor. Ha ha ha. I just received a gift from a senior. I really can't take all the credit, Otani replied, laughing it off. Otani had lived 2 lives, so he handled the attention with practiced ease. Small talk continued until the opening ceremony began. The lights dimmed, music swelled, and spotlights swung to the pool at the center of the stage. Melodic launched hers, elf out of the water in a perfect arc, and Macaulay rode on her back, droplets scattering like diamonds in the light. Melodic rolled and landed, Macaulay followed, graceful and composed, and Mianxiao touched down steadily at his side. Mianxiao, freezing beam, someone called. A white beam shot upward, detonating with a sharp crack. It shattered into a spray of crystalline powder that drifted down like snow. Under that falling shimmer, Melodic and Macaulay danced together, the powder sparkling around them as the crowd watched in awe. Mianxiao, frozen wind. A white whirlwind wrapped around Mianxiao, catching the stage lights and throwing up a glitter of transparent ice crystals. Mianxiao looked like some ethereal dancer, delicate and fierce at once. Melodic, dragon dance. Melodic launched into the air and began to spin. The powdered ice and the shimmering energy from its dragon dance suddenly coalesced, then, under Melodic's control, swept into a slow, circling motion that blossomed into a breathtaking galaxy above the stage. The falling ice crystals rained down like a cascade of shooting stars. Everyone in the arena was stopped cold, Otani and the others in the referee's booth included. For a long, suspended moment, the audience simply watched, spellbound by the display. When the music finally died away, the makeshift Milky Way dissolved like a meteor shower. Melodic and Mianxiao ended their routine in perfect sync and bowed together. Silence held for a beat, then warm, thunderous applause filled the venue. Macaulay waved to the crowd, climbed onto Mianxiao's back, and the 2 of them left the stage with graceful composure amid the cheers. After a short while, the house lights came up. Macaulay changed into fresh clothes and took a seat at the judges' table beside Otani. Oh, Mr. Macaulay, Otani said, smiling as he nodded a greeting. Mikri, that opening performance was incredible. Haha, Miss Melissa, you look absolutely radiant today. Otani sat between them, caught in the middle of their compliments and applause, and had nothing to say. Truthfully, the opening act had been impressive. Before the 2 of them could keep gushing, the host took the stage and ran through the rules and the prizes. The referee followed, calling each contestant's name. When their names were announced, they stood, waved to the crowd, and received polite applause. With the introductions finished, the competition officially began. The first act was a girl named Sally, accompanied by her chinchilla. The pair moved with an easy, practiced chemistry that showcased the chinchilla's cuteness to full effect. When their routine finished, the judges offered their comments. Contestant Sally, Miss Joy began, you and your chinchilla worked beautifully together. Your transitions were graceful, and it's clear you share a very strong bond, a very outstanding performance. Sally flushed and thanked Miss Joy shyly. The next judge stepped forward to give his remarks. Melissa nodded approvingly at Sally's performance. Then it was Otani's turn. He hesitated briefly, then smiled and said, Overall, I think that was very good, but there's one thing I can't overlook. Chino the chinchilla didn't look well, probably from overtraining. Please be careful next time. Don't sacrifice a Pokemon's endurance just to chase a better result. Sally flushed at the stern remark, but forced herself to stay composed. She bowed to Otani to show her thanks. Macaulay was even stricter, pointing out several small faults in Sally's routine. Sally listened humbly and accepted the judge's final verdict. The scores came in, 9, 9, 8.5, and 8, a total of 34.5 points, putting her temporarily in first place. When the scoring finished, Sally walked away feeling disappointed. 34.5 would be an excellent score in a normal glamour contest, but this was a super glamour contest. With such a total, her chances of qualifying were slim. The contestants who followed her gave everything they had, and Otani and the other judges critiqued each performance in turn. Let's welcome the Ovally contestant Musashi Lina to perform. Otani, who had been sipping water, nearly spat it out. Macaulay glanced over. Otani waved him off and said he was fine. He'd almost forgotten about the trio entirely. Before they disembarked, Otani had handed them some spending money and told them they were free to go wherever they pleased. He'd let them know when the ship was leaving. So it was a surprise when Musashi actually showed up to enter the super gorgeous competition. She was impressive. She'd done well in other contests and already had several ribbon badges to her name. Thinking back, it wasn't that out of character. In the anime, Musashi had frequently competed in gorgeous contests and even given lectures to aspiring coordinators. Chapter 77. Both advanced Musashi blinked in surprise when he saw Otani seated as the referee, but he quickly composed himself. After bowing to the judges, he began the performance. He tossed the prepared flying discs into the air one by one. Pumpkin Spirit! Shadow Ball! The pumpkin spirit rose and struck the speeding discs mid-flight. Each collision turned a disc to powder. Musashi danced through the drifting dust. The breeze from his puffy skirt and the swell of music traced a graceful arc as he moved across the field. Pumpkin Spirit, Seed Machine Gun. The spirit unleashed a burst of seeds. The crowd gasped. At first it looked as if the attack was aimed at Musashi, but that was part of the act. The seeds streamed out and then fell into formation behind him, tracking his movements perfectly. Musashi spun and leapt around the arena with effortless timing, every motion synchronized with the spirit. Macaulay watched in silence, admiration clear in his eyes. He said nothing, revealing the trick now would ruin the spectacle. Otani, sitting at the referee's table, also sensed that Musashi had something planned. As the music swelled toward its climax, Musashi's steps across the venue grew quicker and quicker, reminding Otani of a rumba he used to dance in his previous life. The passionate rhythm was contagious. Every face in the crowd turned to watch Musashi as he moved. Mimicking him in midair, the little pumpkin spirit skittered and fired its tiny seed machine gun. It looked absurdly small and impossibly cute. When the music finally cut off, Musashi eased to a stop, and the pumpkin spirit fell silent as well. Musashi led it in a slow circle at center field and called, "Pumpkin Spirit, use strange light." The spirit lifted its head and poured a strange, shimmering light into the air. The glow broke into pinpricks of light that drifted down like slow-falling confetti. The hints that had been laid out across the field suddenly revealed themselves. The dust on the scattered flying discs lit up and shifted through a spectrum of colors under the strange light. Combined with the earlier bursts from the seed machine gun, the pattern coalesced into a massive pumpkin spirit image painted across the field. From a distance, the giant pumpkin portraits scattered around the venue looked startlingly lifelike. Under the stage lights, their faces shifted with every change of expression. When the performance ended, Musashi and the pumpkin spirit embraced and cried, then bowed to the audience with tears of joy. The judges' comments followed, unanimous praise. Even the notoriously picky Macaulay complimented Musashi's routine. Musashi hugged the pumpkin spirit, who beamed at seeing her so happy. The judges began to score. 10, 10, 9.5, 9, a total of 38.5. The host announced the result with excitement. Congratulations to Miss Sweet Musashi Lina for achieving the highest score so far. She is currently in first place. The score was no exaggeration. Otani also gave his marks sincerely. Musashi bowed toward the judges' table, then hugged the pumpkin spirit again and waved to the crowd. The audience returned the gesture with a warm, sustained round of applause. "I haven't seen such a creative coordination trainer in a long time," Macaulay said. As someone who'd watched countless contest performances, he'd grown used to seeing many trainers recycle the same ideas, but not today. Once, 3 coordinators entered the same contest using virtually identical routines. It was easier for them to lift moves from their predecessors than to invent something new, but Macaulay hated it. Those copied routines ruined the elegance he had worked so hard to cultivate in the competitions. If you could earn top marks by plagiarizing, who would bother to be original? Macaulay gave the 3 trainers the lowest possible score and publicly scolded them. That reprimand slowed the trend, but it didn't stop trainers from borrowing and adapting pieces of others' work. They rarely copied an entire routine outright. More often they borrowed moves or motifs which meant many performances began to look alike and left audiences feeling artistically fatigued. That's also why Macaulay admired Musashi so much. Musashi's movements weren't perfect, but those very imperfections had their own beauty. For that alone, Macaulay awarded him a 9, the highest score he had given so far. Musashi arrived backstage to a chorus of flattering praise from Kojiro and Meow Meow. After a few minutes, his playful side broke through. He produced a delicate folding fan, pressed it to his mouth, and laughed loudly. Cindy, waiting to go on, felt the pressure of the moment. Mingshu stood beside her, whispering encouragement. She glanced at him, summoned her courage, planted a quick peck on his cheek, and bolted away, the bewildered Tanabata bluebird following behind. Mingshu stood frozen, one hand to his cheek, a dazed grin spreading across his face. In the wings, Cindy pressed a hand to her flushed cheeks, baffled by her own boldness. She forced herself to calm down just in time. Her name was called. Next up, please welcome the final coordinator to perform, contestant Cindy. Cindy took a deep breath, swung up onto the Tanabata bluebird's back, and said, "Let's go, Tanabata bluebird." The bird launched into the arena with her. For today's competition, Cindy had chosen a dress that hinted at traditional Chinese style, a graceful gown with a ribbon tied at one shoulder. Poised atop the back of the Chixie, Tanabata bluebird, she began her routine. Otani watched anxiously. The bluebird wasn't flying slowly. At this height, a fall would be catastrophic, even for the fit people of the Pokémon world. Cindy was brave, too brave, he thought, but she never faltered. As she danced, tiny petals tucked into her sleeves fluttered free and drifted down over the arena. The bluebird circled the venue, carrying her on its back. Then, with a sudden, fearless leap, Cindy arched backward in midair. The Chixie bluebird reacted instantly, accelerating to catch her. The crowd burst into warm, enthusiastic applause. For Cindy, everything else dropped away. She moved and spun to the music, weightless and graceful, like a fairy. "Chixie bluebird, dragon dance," she called. At her cue, the bluebird began its own dance. The move concentrated energy into a dazzling surge that left a long, luminous trail in the bird's wake. Miss Joyce stared, stunned. Macaulay's eyes widened in surprise. Mingshu watched Cindy on the backstage monitor, silently cheering for her, though the tightness in his clenched fist betrayed his nerves. As the music sped up, her rhythm quickened and the choreography grew more daring. She seemed to soar through the air. When the music cut, she landed perfectly and struck her final pose. Chixie bluebird, dragon stars. A shimmering Chixie bluebird circled above her and unleashed the dragon stars. Under the bird's control, the energies of the stars crashed into one another, scattering luminous sparks. The bluebird gathered that power, trailing it behind like a comet, an entire swath of light that looked almost like a dragged galaxy. Slowly, the energy thinned and began to fall. The bluebird hovered over Cindy as the glowing fragments drifted down and showered the stage, lifting the whole performance to its peak. At the end, the bird settled beside her. Cindy leaned in, and they nuzzled close. Macaulay was the first to clap. A moment later, the rest of the audience erupted into applause, as if waking from a dream. Backstage, Musashi bit down on her handkerchief, clearly unwilling, but even she had to admit Cindy had been outstanding. Kojiro and Meowth didn't dare make a sound. They were practically holding their breaths for fear Musashi would notice them and take her anger out on them. Cindy's performance won unanimous praise. 10, 10, 10, 9.5, total 39.5. In the first-round exhibition match, Cindy was a well-deserved first place. The 8 performers with the highest scores would advance to tomorrow's performance competition to determine the final rankings. Finally over, Otani thought, exhausted after a whole day in the judge's booth. Miko, Alai, by contrast, was positively buzzing. He'd found a lot of promising talent today, which was great news for both him and the gorgeous competition. Chapter 78, The End. Macaulay woke Otani before dawn, the same as always. The routine never changed. Macaulay's professional crew put him through their grueling pre-show regimen until he looked roughed up and flushed, then primped him until he seemed to glow. Today, however, the atmosphere at the venue felt different. For the first time in the history of the gorgeous competition, the judges wouldn't be handing out scores. They were only there to observe the proceedings and make sure no one cheated. As the doors opened and the audience filtered in, gigantic screens around the arena filled with advertisements and promotional reels. Backstage, Otani sat on a sofa, restless and bored, watching the light and color spill through the entrance. Musashi had arrived early as well and was busy with her own preparations. She meant to come over and say something, but when Otani looked up at her, she stopped. She was still in disguise for the contest, and Otani's expression told her that now wasn't the time for distractions. Soon after, Mingshu and Cindy arrived hand in hand. Mingshu saw Otani and walked over with Cindy at her side. Cheerful. "Mr. Otani, good morning," she said. "Good morning, Mingshu. Good morning, Cindy," Otani replied, glancing down at their linked hands and giving a teasing, easy smile. Mingshu gave a sheepish smile and scratched the back of his head. Cindy flushed a little, but didn't hide anything. After the last match, she had confessed her feelings to him. Their relationship was already ambiguous, and with a girl openly pursuing a boy, the rest had fallen into place naturally. Otani hadn't meant to tease them. He offered his sincere congratulations instead. The three of them chatted for a few minutes, then Cindy left to get ready for the next match. Mingshu stayed behind, looking dazed. Otani rolled his eyes at him as if to snap him out of it, said a quick goodbye and followed Cindy. He watched them go with a fond smile. I smiled to myself and silently wished them well, then checked the time. It was almost showtime. I stood and headed for my seat in the venue. Macaulay came out at the same time to look for Otani. Since there was no need for officiating today, the mayor and Miss Joy weren't here. They were busy people, and it had already been a lot for them to stay the whole of yesterday. When the fireworks died away, the competition officially began. Musashi and Cindy weren't drawn into the same group, a relief for both of them, and the first pair of coordination trainers stepped onto the stage. The announcer ran through the rules one more time. This wasn't a traditional battle. Both sides start with 100 points, and whichever trainer has the higher score when time runs out wins. If one Pokémon is rendered unable to continue, the other trainer wins immediately. Gorgeous battles, unlike standard fights, place a premium on style and precise energy control, and each trainer may only send out one Pokémon. Otani had come specifically to watch. He figured there would be a lot to learn here. The arena lights settled on the two trainers as they prepared. A whistle sounded. "Go, Marill," one trainer called. "Dance, Ninetales," the other answered. Marill had the type advantage. In raw attributes, it could keep Ninetales on the defensive. Still, Ninetales' trainer showed no sign of worry, confidence carved into every movement. "Marill, use water cannon." A jet of water burst from Marill's mouth. As the little Pokémon turned, the stream spiraled into a twisting column. The judges immediately docked 5 points from the Ninetales' trainer. He only smiled, calm, unbothered. "QB, use lightning flash to cut through it." The Ninetales moved like a gust of wind. He sprinted, leapt, and spun clean through the spiraling water. There wasn't a single drop on him. In the same motion, he struck Marill with a crackling flash of lightning, then finished with a graceful somersault as he landed. The judges penalized Marill's trainer 10 points. Because the opponent had effectively used and turned his move against him, the adduction was harsher. They traded blows back and forth after that, neither gaining a clear advantage. It was a stalemate for a while. Understandable when the coordination trainers who made it this far were all exceptionally skilled. From the referee's stand, Otani watched with growing excitement. Could a Pokémon really smash an opponent's attack and then redirect that energy to power its own move? Could a bubble beam be controlled so precisely that every bubble's landing point was chosen in advance? The creativity and technique on display left him practically buzzing with admiration. In the end, Marill came up short against the Ninetales. QB opened with a shadow clone, and then followed with a jet of flame. The clone itself didn't deal any real damage, but the sheer force and spectacle of the attack were impressive enough to sway the judges. When the dust settled, Marill's trainer had lost. The margin was 10 points. The rest of the matches kept the crowd on edge. Musashi had a much tougher time than Cindy. Every exchange against her opponent was a grind. Still, she found an opening and struck decisively, landing a shadow ball that won her the match. During the halftime break, Otani and Macaulay went to get lunch together. Otani peppered Macaulay with questions about his energy control techniques, and Macaulay generously explained what he knew. Otani absorbed everything eagerly, and before they left, he slipped a small supercube into Macaulay's hands. Macaulay looked puzzled. He hadn't seen one before. Otani leaned in and whispered a few words. Macaulay froze for a moment, then, with calm composure, tucked the cube close to his body. After lunch, they went back to the arena. The final round was scheduled for the afternoon, and Musashi and Cindy were placed in the same bracket. Otani felt a twinge of regret as he watched the match. Musashi stood no chance against Cindy. Cindy wasn't just a coordinator, she was a powerhouse who'd competed at the courts conference. That alone said something about her backing. Her family must be rich enough to bankroll serious training. The other semi finished almost before it began. Sylveon, the fairy-type Eevee, simply outclassed Psyduck, incapacitating it and taking the win decisively. The Musashi-Cindy bout went more or less how Otani had expected. It wasn't that Musashi lacked talent, she had plenty, but she didn't have the resources. If Musashi and the Pumpkin Spirit hadn't spent time training on Otani's farm, they probably wouldn't have made it to the semis at all. Then the final started, and Otani's assumptions were overturned. Cindy, who had seemed so solid, was defeated by Sylveon. That Sylveon wasn't to be underestimated. She'd been holding back, a dark horse who'd pretended to be harmless until the moment it counted. Otani found himself silently impressed. They had waited until the finals to show everything they had, whether from pride or strategy, and though the contest had ended rather abruptly, the formalities were still observed. As he stepped out of the venue, Otani noticed Macaulay hauling someone out the back door. A person bundled head to toe in heavy cloth and a veil, disguised so completely they might as well have been unrecognizable. Otani didn't want to meddle and started to turn back toward the hotel. Then a voice stopped him. "Lucia, what are you doing here?" Macaulay stared at the tightly wrapped figure, bewilderment plain on his face. The disguise had been that convincing, he hadn't recognized the person at first. The bundled figure shrugged, then ripped off the wig and veil in one smooth motion. Short, pale green hair fell free, revealing a delicate face with a faint resemblance to Macaulay. "Uncle, what's wrong?" "Of course I can come," Lucia said, hands on her hips and a touch of petulance in her tone. "That's not what I meant," Macaulay said, flushing as he hurried to explain. He loved his niece. He had trained her in coordination work since she was a child, and she had always shown promise. She hadn't disappointed him today. Her talent had been obvious. Otani watched the exchange for a moment, then continued on toward the hotel, leaving uncle and niece to their reunion. Lucia had made a name for herself in countless contests and eventually became a talent scout for the Super Gorgeous contest, specializing in discovering promising coordinators. She even had her own fan club in Shuijing City, only Macaulay was more popular than she was. "This Super Gorgeous contest isn't a master-level event," Macaulay said, clearly displeased. "If you take part, wouldn't that upset the balance of the competition?" Lucia flushed a little. "I didn't think that far ahead," she said, batting her eyelashes. "I just wanted to try it. Uncle Macaulay, don't be mad." Macaulay didn't know what to do with his niece's antics, so he picked up the phone and called the contest organizers to explain the situation. Although they couldn't change the ranking, the staff revoked all of Lucia's prizes and redistributed them among the other 3 semifinalists. They announced publicly that Lucia had given up her spot. Musashi and the others received the extra rewards and naturally had no complaints. We returned to the hotel room in high spirits to celebrate. He even declared he'd win the championship next time. Kojiro and Meow Meow quickly rallied to his side, and Musashi beamed with happiness. Otani watched the noisy trio with a headache. "If you want to celebrate, fine," he said. "But why are you in my room?" The housekeeper, irritated and convinced they were disturbing his rest, started to scold them and wanted to shoo them out. Otani stopped her with a wave. "It's all right. A little noise won't hurt." He changed into something more comfortable and lay down on the sofa to rest. Having only just recovered from a serious illness, he fell asleep almost at once. When Meow Meow saw Otani sleeping, she signaled Kojiro and Musashi to be quiet. The 3 of them tiptoed from the room. They had planned to celebrate with the other officers, but since the cadres needed to rest, They decided to take their celebration back to their own rooms instead. The housekeeper sighed. She felt Otani was far too indulgent with those three, but there was nothing she could do. While he slept, Otani had a strange, disturbing dream. He imagined himself turning into a ditto, being captured for experiments, and dying on the table. Then the scene shifted. He became a Blastoise, and again he perished under cold, clinical lights on an experimental slab. The same scene kept replaying in his mind. By the time Otani opened his eyes, night had already fallen. That dream felt so strange, he thought. Chapter 79. Forced to stop. Otani woke the next morning, still a little shaken. The dream from the night before had felt impossibly real. Even now he could feel a chill just thinking about it. If someone actually did what he had seen, they would be utterly ruthless. Thankfully, it had only been a dream. But why that dream, and why so vivid? Was it a premonition or something else? He got up, washed, and found breakfast already waiting. He kept turning the question over in his head. What made him so sure something was wrong? Then he noticed the change. The suffix on his superpower had shifted. Intermediate superpower, mutation, enhanced perception. Perception isn't the same as precognition, he realized. Perception means sensing something that has already happened. If he could sense it, then the event couldn't be far away. That clicked everything into place. Otani called Sirona and Macaulay right away and explained what he'd experienced and the change in his ability. There was a long silence on Sirona's end before she finally spoke. If this is true, it's very bad, she said quietly. Do not make this public. If it's confirmed, it will be a huge blow to Jian City's reputation. This will also be a heavy blow to the Sinnoh Alliance. Sirona stayed calm the moment the crisis came into focus. She thought through the consequences on the spot and spoke with measured certainty. My suggestion is we investigate covertly. Macaulay and I will disguise ourselves and come meet you. Otani's voice tightened. He trusted disguises as little as he trusted luck. I'm a bit worried. Your disguises are always elaborate. What if you get recognized? Leave that to me, Sirona replied. My niece has been in Jiayuan City recently. She's an expert at disguises. All right, let's meet at the hotel, Otani agreed. He ended the call, hurried out of the room, and found the trio to give them their orders. Their mission, comb Jiayuan City for suspicious people. The target was a laboratory, possibly an underground facility. The team's spirits lifted at the chance for action. We'll get it done, the three of them shouted in unison. After rallying the others, Otani forced himself to settle down. He went to the hotel lobby, chose an empty corner, and waited for Sirona and the disguises to arrive. About an hour later, two unfamiliar figures sat down beside him. No one else was nearby, and the pair made no attempt to hide their presence. The plan is this, one of them said. Otani, use your perception ability. Search all of Jiayuan City, the other man instructed. Sirona and I will pose as a couple and stay close to you. If anything happens, press this alarm button. Sirona and I will get the message and come to your aid immediately. Okay, got it. Otani nodded, took the small alarm device, and slipped it into his pocket. The trio had already finished their preparations and left ahead of him. Kojiro and Meowth were going to find a spot to set up a detector. Otani had offered to cover all the expenses. Kojiro and Meowth looked like they might cry. They'd never been on such a well-funded operation before. Otani started walking slowly, focusing on his perception. The first area he scanned was around the hotel. He tuned his senses carefully and waited for any abnormality, but nothing registered. He moved on, sweeping the route they'd taken yesterday, checking each location methodically. He searched like that all day and came up with nothing. By evening, a nagging doubt had crept in. Had he misinterpreted the signal? Still, there had been no word from Kojiro or the others, so he couldn't afford to drop his guard. He kept the alarm in his pocket and continued his watchful, patient search. A short while later, Otani's phone buzzed. The trio had found something unusual and sent their location. He hurried over and, half an hour later, arrived where Kojiro and the others were waiting. How is it? Have you picked the spot? Kojiro asked as Otani approached, holding out a tablet. The screen showed a field in the distance and, faintly, a large device operating there with almost no noise. Otani frowned at the image. Kojiro stepped forward to explain, and once he started, Otani quickly grasped the idea. They were using vibration, sending sound waves into the ground and reading the echoes. From those readings, they detected a huge void underfoot. Before Otani could ask more, Sirona and Macaulay arrived. He told them what Kojiro had found. Sirona hesitated for a heartbeat, then spoke. Dagu, it'll be awkward for you to take part in what comes next. I hope you understand. Otani went quiet for a moment, then nodded. Sirona took the tablet from Kojiro and began contacting the Sinnoh Alliance to coordinate a siege. Kojiro's instruments had already mapped the underground space, including several concealed passageways, so they had the information they needed to plan their approach. Sirona planned to take it step by step. The safest course was to disperse a sleeping gas, then confirm there was no movement below before moving in to make any arrests. Macaulay examined the device with evident admiration. This machine is amazing, Otani. Did your friends build it? Otani tilted his head, puzzled. Yeah, why do you ask? I was just thinking the Sinnoh Alliance would be very interested in something like this, Macaulay said. I'm not sure about that. You can ask Kojiro, Otani replied. I only said it out of curiosity. No hidden meaning, Macaulay added quickly. Otani glanced toward the exit. Right. Should I head back to the hotel then? Yes, Macaulay answered. I'll explain the next steps to you in person. It's mainly for your safety. All right, I understand. Otani didn't linger. He left quickly and returned to the hotel. Later that night, unable to sleep, he stood at the window and stared into the darkness. At the investigation site, a team moved silently below ground. Their leader was Sirona, Tyrantrum standing guard beside her. With the information Otani had provided, they reached their destination far sooner than they otherwise would have. Without his help, it might have taken them ages to find this place, or they might never have found it at all. 13 unconscious people were carried out, one by one. All of them wore research uniforms. In the underground laboratory, the rescue team found rows of dissected and experimented on Pokémon, some already dead, others lying comatose on metal tables. The air smelled of antiseptic and something fouler beneath it. Sirona clenched a sheet of paper in her hand, fury building beneath her calm. This group of maniacs actually tried to make gods, she said through gritted teeth. Wusong flipped through the experimental records he'd recovered, his face dark with anger. Sirona's expression remained hard and unreadable. I'll leave the rest of the interrogations to you, she said. Where are you going? Wusong asked. Lurabite told me there's another junker hiding somewhere in this facility, Sirona replied coldly. I'm going to find him myself. She handed the file over to an officer and started down a corridor with Landshark at her heels. Farther into the complex, past locked doors and dead-end labs, they reached the deepest chamber, a sealed lab with reinforced glass. Inside, a middle-aged man stood hunched before a bioreactor, eyes bright with fanatic obsession. A pale, indistinct shape floated in the tank, lit by a sickly green glow. Ha-ha! I'm almost there. Just a little more, the man murmured to himself. Landshark lashed out, claws flashing. With a single powerful swipe of Dragon Claw, the reinforced door tore open. Sirona strode into the room with confidence, Tyrannosaurus close at her heels. The middle-aged man inside barely looked up from his work. Then, without turning, he called out, Sirona, long time no see. He finally spun around, and Sirona's jaw tightened when she saw him. Dr. Sakurai. A flash of displeasure crossed her face. Dr. Sakurai had been a rising star in Pokémon biology, brilliant, respected, and no one would have expected him to stoop to this. He laughed, a manic edge to it. Sigh. Rona, do you know what this could mean? If my experiment works, I'll be remembered as the creator of a man-made Pokémon god. Imagine that. Ha! You won't succeed, Dr. Sakurai. Stand down, Sirona said flatly. At her command, her Landshark, her Garchomp, went on alert. Sakurai answered by slowly pressing a button. From the machines around him, a horde of malformed Pokémon tumbled out, some with extra limbs, some with 2 heads, many horribly twisted. What was most chilling was that their eyes were empty, animated bodies without a soul. Greco, help them, Sirona said, a stab of anger mixed with sorrow. Greco, her Garchomp, nodded and sprang into action. In a flurry of coordinated strikes, Landshark cut through the ranks, quickly incapacitating dozens of the deformed creatures and preventing them from being hurt further. Dr. Sakurai's triumphant laugh faltered as he watched his creations fall apart under Sirona's care. his face twisting with fury and disbelief. Sakurai clapped his hands calmly in front of the operating table. Excellent, but it's too late. My final masterpiece is already complete. Ha ha ha! Show yourself, my little baby. As he spoke, 2 slashes of red light sliced through the fluid in the culture tank. A cold, oppressive aura rolled out from the chamber, thick with hatred, and slammed into everyone in the room. Even Sakurai, who had been grinning the whole time, went a little pale. Go on, my greatest work. 001. If Otani were here, he'd have known at once what it was. Mewtwo. But this one was wrong. All black, eyes burning red and thoroughly unhinged. A restraining collar ringed its neck. Kill them, 001, Sakurai ordered. The black Mewtwo turned and looked straight at him. With casual, almost bored movements, it reached up and tugged the collar free. The device detonated in a shower of sparks, and the creature simply caught the fragments in its hand and crushed them between its fingers. This is impossible, Sakurai screamed. Do you think you can break my control so easily? He snarled, fumbling for a remote. He jabbed the button hard. Nothing. He jabbed it again and again, panic rising. The remote remained dead. The black Mewtwo opened its palm, the broken pieces of the collar crushed into a metallic lump. It held them up as if answering him, eyes cold and unyielding. The lab fell into stunned silence. A small chip crumbled to dust in his palm. Sakurai let out a soft, astonished laugh. Your intelligence surpasses anything I imagined. The rest of my work should have been finished by you. Without hesitation, Black Mewtwo reached up and squeezed Sakurai's throat. The scientist went limp and collapsed to the floor, a strange, satisfied smile fixed on his face. Oh, excellent, I succeeded, he murmured as the light left his eyes. At the same moment, the base itself began to tremble violently. Black Mewtwo absorbed the motion, stamping it down until it faded into nothing. None of the disturbance traveled up to the surface. There was cold admiration in the silence that followed. Sakurai truly had been a genius, only the second human after Team Rocket to artificially create Pokémon. When the last echoes died away, Black Mewtwo turned and regarded Cynthia. She showed no fear. She met the Pokémon's gaze steadily. Then, without warning, a voice slipped into her mind. Hello, human. Chapter 80. Questioning Hello, human. Sharona did not flinch. As the league champion, she'd seen stranger things than a Pokémon that could speak. She was as much a student of legend as she was a battler. Stories of talking or thinking Pokémon were part of her life. Still, she let her voice stay calm. I understand how you feel, but with your intellect, you must know there are only a very few people like Sakurai. Black Mewtwo's eyes did not change. Of course I know that, he said, but that doesn't stop me from hating humanity. If it comes to it, I will stop you, even if I die here. Sharona's words were iron. She turned to Garchomp. Go, now. Garchomp surged forward, but barely had it moved when psychic force slammed into both trainer and Pokémon. Black Mewtwo raised its hands and took them both in an invisible grip. Powerful, absolute. The pressure was suffocating, the kind of force that made hope feel pointless. Garchomp thrashed, teeth flashing, claws scraping air, but its struggles did nothing to loosen the grip. Relax, human, Black Mewtwo said softly. If I wanted to destroy this place, it would take only a moment. He released them. Sharona sagged, steadying herself. Garchomp dropped to all fours, panting and glaring. Black Mewtwo retracted his hands and folded them behind his back, his gaze sweeping the distance as if looking beyond the ruined landscape. You know, he continued, speaking almost to himself, when I was created, there was nothing inside me but hatred and the urge to destroy. Until the day a warm presence brushed past me, I had only ever been a dream, noise and images without meaning. Instinct drove me to use every scrap of power I had to follow it. At last I came close enough to see a warm soul. And yet, by reaching out, I brought misfortune to him. He dreamed everything I had dreamed, lived through it as if it were his own memory. And still he remained himself. The moment I realized that, I woke. Self-awareness bloomed inside me like a painful light. Questions poured in. Why was I brought into this world? What purpose did my existence serve? Did humanity have to be destroyed for me to matter? Could anyone answer me? Humans? Mewtwo turned and fixed Sharona with a serious look. Can you answer that? Sharona was silent. She had no ready answer. Finally, she said, If you want to know, why don't you go and see for yourself? Go see. Where? You already have the answer in your heart. Why are you asking me? He bowed his head as if confessing a secret. He is my salvation, my light. I want to be with him, but I'm too ugly. I was born from hatred and death. Young Otani won't care, Sirona said gently. He loves every Pokémon the same. Me too, came a small, hopeful voice. It was Black Kaomeng, watching with anticipation. Of course, Sirona replied, nodding. But I think you can change your appearance. Can you disguise yourself as another Pokémon? Certainly. Sirona pulled out her phone and showed the picture to Black Kaomeng. The creature looked at it. A black light shimmered over its body. It contracted, and in moments it had transformed into a small, jet-black Eevee. Is that all? Sirona asked. The black Eevee lifted its head and fixed Sirona with its red eyes. Yes, it said, or at least Sirona heard the intent in its gaze. I will come with you. Give me to Dagu. He'll take care of me. The Eevee hesitated for a heartbeat, then leapt into Sirona's arms. She carried it out, drawing surprised stares from everyone they passed. Cold sweat prickled at the back of her neck. The creature's body still radiated that dark, psychic energy, faint but unmistakable. It didn't drive her mad, but it pushed hard at her willpower. Macaulay, call Otani here now, Sirona said, her voice tight. The Eevee slipped free of her arms as if on cue and sat on the ground, tail twitching, its red eyes bright with eager expectation. Sirona remained frozen for a long moment afterward, letting her breathing even out. She finally understood why this odd Pokémon had clung to the idea Otani as salvation. Just moments ago, she'd had the sickening sensation of her mind being wrapped in a tangle of malevolent thoughts. It felt like being in a canoe on a black sea, one wrong wave and everything might overturn. Macaulay, uneasy but determined, still picked up the phone and called Otani. Otani, who the others sometimes called Dagu, was as puzzled as Macaulay. Why summon him so late at night? What could have happened? Still, despite the hour, he changed quickly and went. Under staff supervision, they headed down into the facility. From a distance, Otani saw Sirona sitting on the floor, exhausted, and a Tyrannosaurus, huge and alert, standing nearby. Two small red eyes glowed in the dimness. Stepping closer, Otani realized the eyes belonged to a black Eevee. That's Ibrahimovic, Sirona said, her voice thin. He's the product of an experiment. Otani, will you take care of him? Ibrahimovic lifted his head and looked straight at Otani. Without hesitating, Otani nodded. Of course. Take as long as you need, he said. Relief washed over Sirona at his quick agreement. Otani crouched down and ran a hand gently over the Eevee's head. The little Pokemon's emotions were raw and immediate. Sadness, grief, pain, and a hard, bitter edge of hatred. Otani felt them all under his palm and held his ground, steady and calm, as Ibrahimovic breathed and waited. It was you who guided me back then. That's how I found you. Bye. Ibrahimovic answered with a soft whine and leaned his head into Otani's hand. Otani scooped him up instinctively and began to stroke him. Ibrahimovic relaxed at once, settled into his arms, and was asleep within minutes. For many days and nights, Hai Chaomeng had been unable to sleep. Dark thoughts gnawed at him, corroding his soul. The torment nearly drove him mad. Fortunately, at last, redemption came. Sirona stared at Otani, surprised. Aren't you uncomfortable, Otani? No, Otani said. I'm fine. It's just that the little guy is a bit cold. I'm sorry, Otani. Sirona's apology was quiet. Otani blinked, confused for a moment, but he didn't press it. He assumed she was apologizing for what had happened earlier. He could understand why. It had been a shocking scandal, and as champion of the Alliance, she had been trying to protect it. There's no need to apologize, Sirona. I wasn't bothered by what happened. Sirona forced a smile. Macaulay glanced their way as if he had an idea what was going on, but he kept quiet. Otani, though, couldn't hide his concern. Are you all right, Sirona? You look pale. I'm fine, Sirona said, brushing it off. I just need to rest for a little while. She waved him away, but Otani hesitated, then stepped out of the underground area. He found an Alliance staff member, borrowed some ingredients and a few kitchen utensils from logistics, and set about making fried rice. When he returned, he had already dished out a couple of bowls. Ibrahimovic was watching them with obvious longing. Otani smiled and handed him one bowl. The little guy looked pleased, clearly a bit of a glutton. Otani then asked the staff to deliver the remaining bowls to Sirona and Macaulay. The staffer accepted, practically drooling at the smell. Otani laughed and promised he'd make more for everyone later. The people around them cheered. Back underground, Sirona was holding herself together as she directed the others when a familiar scent caught her attention. A staff member came sprinting up, thrust a food box into her hands, and then turned and ran off. Sirona stared down at the box, puzzled. When they opened the food box, an irresistible aroma spilled out. Sirona felt a wave of relief wash through her. Some of the soreness and nausea she'd been carrying simply eased away. She picked up a portion of egg-fried rice and handed the box to Macaulay. He closed his eyes, inhaled deeply, and sighed in delight. "Dagu's gotten better and better," he murmured. "Even plain fried rice smells this good." They didn't bother with ceremony. The first mouthful released all of that fragrance at once. For Sirona, it felt almost transcendent, like a small baptism. The aches and bruises from earlier seemed to melt away, and her spirits brightened. Macaulay's expression showed he felt the same. They exchanged a surprised look, grinned, and dug in. Landshark watched them with something close to envy. A voice crackled over the intercom. "Come on, everyone. Mr. Otani has prepared a midnight snack for us." The crew, who'd been working all night and were exhausted, had already been drifting toward the smell of fried rice. At the call, they became instantly animated, hunger and curiosity overcoming fatigue. In minutes, they were crowding around, eager for a taste. They all turned to Sirona. "Let's go up in groups for supper. Team leader, please organize it." "As you command, Mr. Champion." Excited chatter broke out as they drew lots to decide who would go up first for the midnight snack. The results came quickly. Those left behind looked a little disappointed. "Don't worry, Otani will make enough," Sirona said, trying to reassure them. Her words lifted their spirits. "Hurry up and finish your work. You can eat when you're done." The first shift returned raving. It's so good," someone whooped. "It's delicious. Why are you crying?" another asked. "I can't stop eating. What am I going to do?" came a plaintive reply. "You're making me want to cry too. I want another bowl. Otani, give me another." "Hey, you scoundrel, give me one too." Otani looked at them all with a tired, amused expression. "All of you? Fine, fine. I'll make enough." He set to frying rice without stopping, ladling and tossing as bowls were handed out. Ibrahimovic sat quietly nearby, watching him cook as if cataloging every move. Plates kept coming, conversations and teasing overlapping with the clatter of utensils. Before long, everyone had eaten their fill, some far beyond it. A few groaned and leaned back, overindulged but happy. Thankfully, with the camp's logistical support and a few doses of restorative medicine on hand, they recovered quickly. Within no time, they were energetic again, buzzing with renewed life. They worked faster and, under the professionals' direction, finished before dawn. The site was sealed with directional blasting technology. "It's finally over," Otani thought. He carried Ibrahimovic back to the hotel and collapsed into bed. Ibrahimovic curled up against him and within moments fell into a deep sleep. She liked taking care of her younger sister and tucked the blanket over them both. A colleague slipped quietly out of the room, leaving Otani to get some well-deserved rest. Chapter 81. Continuing the Journey. After arriving in Jiayuan City, Otani had been working non-stop, as busy as a salaried employee, and had little time to rest. That afternoon, once he finally woke up, he decided it was time to move on. He lingered over the map for a while, uncertain which city to visit next, then chose to head south to Wetland City. There was a large marsh and a hunting area there where he could catch water-type Pokémon and let them live in the lake on his farm. Beyond that lay the seaside city he had been longing to see. Sunshine, beaches, pretty girls, just imagining it made him smile. Above the seaside city was the famous Champions Road. How could he come all the way to Sinnoh and not go see it? In the afternoon, Otani packed his things and said his goodbyes to Sirona and Macaulay. He mounted the bicycle he had bought at the Jiayuan City Mall and set off at a relaxed pace. Ibrahimovic rode in the basket, eyes wide with curiosity as he took in the passing scenery. Hua Bebe lay contentedly on Dagu's head, smiling to herself. With his companions settled, Otani pedaled southward, eager for whatever the road would bring. Raidenmon and Kintaro trotted along behind him, while Landshark rode in the back seat. Venusaur stayed curled up in its Pokeball. Gyarados and Snorlax refused to walk, so Otani put them back in their Pokeballs as well. At the pace he was keeping, There was no way he would reach Wetland City before dark, so he decided to make camp for the night. No point in rushing. Sirona and Macaulay watched him pedal off. After holding back for a long time, Macaulay finally spoke. "Sirona, is there something wrong with that Ibrahimovic?" Sirona hesitated, then told him everything. As Macaulay heard the story, he grew frightened, but he also felt a strange relief. Ibrahimovic's obsession with Otani had, oddly enough, prevented a catastrophe in Jiayuan City. Night fell as Otani rode on slowly. When he realized darkness would catch him, he pulled off the road and found an empty lot to set up camp. He unpacked the tent from his backpack and began to pitch it. Ibrahimovic stayed by his side the whole time, inseparable. With the help of the Pokémon that had come along, the tent went up quickly, and soon Otani was assembling a simple dinner. Even out in the wild, Otani wasn't going to skimp on dinner. He decided to make beef Wellington. He worked the dough with practiced hands, then pulled the beef he'd bought earlier from his backpack. He seared the beef and pre-cooked the vegetables, let them cool, and set everything aside. When the fillings were ready, he laid them on the puff pastry, wrapped them carefully, brushed the surface with egg wash, and slid them into the oven to bake at 180 degrees Celsius for 15 minutes. The oven was a compact camping model that ran on electricity, so as long as one of their electric-type Pokémon provided power, it worked perfectly. Before long, the first beef Wellington was ready. Ibrahimovic noticed the hungry look in Steak's eyes, and Otani, seeing just how eager he was, handed him the first portion. He made a few more Wellingtons to share with the other meat-loving Pokémon, and then prepared one for himself. While the pastries baked, Otani unpacked Pokémon rations and food cubes, portioning them out to match each Pokémon's appetite. Eevee sniffed at his ration but didn't eat it. After finishing its food cube, Eevee nudged the bowl towards Snorlax. Snorlax beamed innocently, scooped up the bowl, and devoured it in a single gulp. With full bellies, Otani and the Pokémon settled down around the campfire. Otani took out his guitar and began to play. Eevee listened intently, ears twitching with each chord, and the other Pokémon gathered around, happily drawn to the music. After a few songs, Otani decided it was time to turn in. Before crawling into the tent, he grabbed a few extra Pokémon rations and stashed them well away from camp. He left enough to be useful, but hid them far enough to keep scavengers from finding the main campsite. He yawned, slipped into the tent, and fell asleep. Ibrahimovic leapt up and curled into his arms without hesitation. Otani was no longer surprised by the Pokémon's clinginess. Who could refuse such a furry little cutie? Garchomp and Flora took the outer posts, sleeping at the edge of the Great Valley, while the rest of the team settled into the large tent the valley's people had put up for them. In the darkness, the scent of the hidden rations drifted through the brush. A few curious wild Pokémon nosed around, found the stash, grabbed a small portion, and slipped away as quietly as they had come. Nothing else happened that night. Early the next morning, Otani packed his gear and continued the journey. He pushed the pedals a little harder this time. The high-tech bicycle behaved more like a motorcycle at full speed, and before noon, he rolled into Wetland City. Shitsugan City sat on the edge of a vast swamp called the Great Wetland. The wetlands had once been part of the sea. Over time, the water had receded, leaving rich, marshy land where many rare Pokémon, found nowhere else, now lived. The expanse of water and reeds keep summers cool, making the area perfect for water-type Pokémon. Because Frog is found only in this region, it has become the city's official mascot. Whenever Otani thought of Frog, he pictured Brock's Frog, an unusually expressive Pokémon with a distinct personality. Otani inhaled the slightly humid air, folded his bicycle, stuffed it into his backpack, and walked into the city. Shitsugan's architecture was noticeably different from Jiayuan City's. A large sign at the entrance proclaimed the town's pride, a city in harmony with the wetlands. Locals took the wetlands' cleanliness seriously. Littering was frowned upon and punished sternly. He checked into a hotel, booked a comfortable room, and put his things away. Then he set off to wander the streets and explore the city. Ibrahimovic stayed curled in Otani's arms and refused to get down, so Otani had no choice but to carry him the whole way. They stopped for lunch on the way to the wetlands, and Otani noticed something odd. Ibrahimovic would only eat the meals Otani cooked for him, and the high-quality food cubes Otani had brought. He turned up his nose at anything else. Worried, after all, Ibrahimovic was a Pokémon created through experiments. Otani gave him a thorough checkup, but found nothing physically wrong. With no clear answer, he let the matter rest for the time being. When they arrived, Otani bought tickets and prepared to go in. Tourists were everywhere. He chartered a small sightseeing car so he and his Pokémon could take in the wetland scenery comfortably. All around them were Pokémon unique to the Sinnoh region, some playing, some sparring, some simply lounging in the marshes. They weren't afraid of the sightseeing vehicles and even approached them, asking for food. Otani reached into his bag, handed out the prepared cubes, and tossed a few. The Pokémon that received them responded with polite little displays of thanks. The outer area of the wetlands served as a tourist zone, populated by ordinary, everyday Pokémon, enjoying the visitors and the open space. Farther in was the hunting zone, the inner reserve, where you had to buy extra tickets and hunting balls, and where identity checks were much stricter. Otani had no intention of going in there today. He was determined to relax. So he spent the whole afternoon messing around in the wetlands, doing nothing in particular. We didn't leave until after dark. Sometimes it's nice to have nothing to think about and nothing you have to do.